Hello, and welcome to Nostalgia Marcana. I'm your host, Doug Leaf. Each episode of this podcast, we'll look back on the movies, TV, games, people, and phenomena that we still love talking about all these years later, and ask ourselves why these bits of pop culture still enchant us today. This week, we'll be revisiting
Thus Spoke God. That is the name of the musical track you just heard, or more specifically, Thus Spoke Zoroaster, a particular version of God. But the ultimate power of the universe is what is on the menu today. We are talking about Stanley Kubrick's towering masterpiece, 2001, A Space Odyssey. One of the works that is simultaneously least dense on plot and most dense on themes that I can imagine. It is a movie where the protagonist is the past, present, and future of the entire human species. So this is going to be one of the biggest topics we've ever tried to tackle on this show. And so to do it, I'm very excited about the panel we have assembled because all four of us have been on each other's podcast, but we've never gotten all four of us together to cast before. So first, I want to introduce a returning guest who helped us most recently to cover Alien, and before that, The Hobbit and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Please welcome back the host of Men of Steel and Another Pass, Case Aiken.
Heyo, Star Children. Doug, it's so great to be back.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you for this. And this came up during our Alien podcast because, that movie borrows a few, things like stately pace and places from this movie. So it was obvious. And then our other two guests also covered something on their show. They covered Contact, which also has some connective tissue to this movie. So please welcome back. They've been on before talking about, among other things, A Christmas Story and Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, from the Media Lit podcast, Randy Allain and Kris Ingersoll. Welcome back, guys.
Doug, thrilled to be here. I got off mute the quickest today, so I'm thrilled to jump in. I just can't tell you how excited I am to cast this pod in this big group. Like you said at the beginning, thrilled to have Case with us and to do this thing.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talked about Contact, we were thinking a lot about this movie. You could do a nice little, 3-movie viewing of 2001, Contact, and Interstellar. And you could kind of look at some similar themes at different points in time. But yeah, I'm pumped. Open the pod bay doors, Doug. I am ready to go.
I'm sorry, Randy, I can't do that. I'm very glad to have all of you here to talk about this because, as you said, there is connective tissue between all of these different movies we've just name checked, not least of which is Carl Sagan, who had a big impact on this film, as well as, of course, Contact, which was his own story. But I'm going to start off the way we always do, talking about our nostalgic memories of the film. Case, I'll start with you. Tell me about your memories of this film and why you're interested in covering it today.
I was trying to remember exactly when I first saw it, and I realized that I watched it to help a classmate write a paper on it. It wasn't even my own paper. It was in a film analysis course in high school, and this classmate just needed some assistance on it, and so I like binged it the night before, and then he like came over and like I helped him work on this paper that was like, you know, our midterm or our final paper for the course, and that was my first exposure to it, and then more recently, I came back to it as an adult, seeing it at an IMAX theater screening with my family, and it was extremely fun to go and take it in this like crazy like film setting, and just experience how huge of a space opera that this movie is, and take it in for all its majesty. And so that sort of reawakened my love for this as a masterpiece, and it's been on my mind to talk about in some form ever since. And I'm really glad that I have the excuse to do so here.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have the excuse to do so as well, because it's going to take all four of us, I think, to really try and do this thing justice. There's so many things to talk about and so many angles. But I'll turn it over to you, Randy. Tell me your nostalgic memories of this film and where it fits into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my first viewing was probably either in college or at least right on the cusp of college, as I was trying to, strengthen my film chops, exploring that world, exploring the art. I took some really wonderful courses at UMass Amherst called Metaphor and Creativity in America at War, with a very metaphor-driven professor. And we watched a lot of great movies, including some Kubrick stuff, like Doctor Strangelove, like Paths of Glory, movies that have continued to matter to me. And I went deeper and deeper on Kubrick. However, my top memory of this film is when I started teaching at a high school. I was a younger man. It was almost 20 years ago. I was not a father just yet. I had a bit more time to myself. And I would run a weekly film club. And I have one student who I will not state his name, although he's deep into his 30s at this point, because this was a long time ago. But I remember I showed the group 2001, and I can still imagine myself watching him watch that final sequence as we go beyond reality, just staring wide-eyed, and at the end just saying, "Mr. Allain, why did you do that to me? You broke my brain, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get it back." Much like Hal, this is memory core is stripped away.
That's awesome. This film, I mean, because this is a film, this is cinema, capital C. Like, it is prime material to be taught in a class. I think so. I would love to be in your class, and that's one of the things I know is like endemic to your podcast is treating any media like it was a work of literature, and this one is suited to a T. So it was one of the reasons I wanted you here on this one. Kris, I'm going to throw it to you though. Tell me your nostalgic memories of 2001.
Well, Randy wasn't my teacher, but I did have a similarly great film teacher when I was in high school. And that's the first time I saw this film, was in TV and film at Stoneham High with Mr. Mujica. And yeah, I guess similar to how this kid must have felt, I didn't have much to say about it at the time, but I knew like I should have a lot to say about it, if that makes sense. That was my first experience of this. It was almost too much for me at 16 to really like grasp, other than grasping the ungraspable nature of it. Like I knew enough to know that this thing was like bigger than I was really ready for at the time. And I don't think I've seen this film since then. So most of my memory of this movie, like my nostalgia that's attached to it, isn't attached to the film as much as it's attached to all the cultural ways, like the cultural osmosis of this film, the ways in which it's got inside of me through other sources, be it The Simpsons or Mel Brooks, right? A History of the World. I think his version of The Dawn of Man is maybe more solid in my mind than Kubrick's, if that's fair.
It centers on a bone of a different kind, yes.
So yeah, I think that all the ways in which this exists in and around us, just within all sci-fi, we said it a little bit before the pod, but all the scribblings of this on the sci-fi that would come, Contact and Star Wars and everything else. So I don't know, man. My nostalgia for this movie, I think, is more of a feeling of connection and a gratitude to it for the groundwork that it laid, like the place that it holds in culture, rather than for the thing itself as I experienced at any one time.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that thing you said about cultural osmosis, I mean, this film still gets I mean, look, Barbie parodied it, in 2024,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They sure did.
To an audience that you would think would have, far less likely a connection to it. But because some of this stuff is so iconic and just so associated with like film, again, capital F, like you can't really ignore some of those things. I mean, whether it's the musical cues, the iconography of the monolith, and like some of these things that have just propagated down. That's interesting hearing all three of you say, like, I kind of watched it roughly in some kind of a scholastic capacity, because I watched this when I was a kid. My memories of this go all the way back to being 4 and watching this movie, because as a little kid, like, some kids get into, dinosaurs or whatever. And my thing was space. I was really, really into outer space, anything having to do with it. I watched Cosmos as a kid a million times. All of those like specials as like the Voyager probe hit Jupiter and then Saturn and Uranus, like they had specials on those things, which I watched over and over again. So my dad, having a scientific bent, was like, yeah, whatever you want to watch about space, like, let's do it. Cause you're into this. And so he showed me this movie. Now, as a little kid, I watched its sequel, 2010, way more times, because 2010, it's a good movie. But it is a movie, not a film, capital F, right? Like, but it is recognizable as a movie with like characters and a structure and a plot that you can follow. 2001 is obviously very, very different. And we'll talk a lot about like how this movie is structured, just in a completely iconoclastic way to buck any normal narrative trends. So I was able to obviously keep track of what's going on. The plot of this movie is actually exceedingly simple. So much so that like I'm looking down at my notes. Whenever we cover a movie on this podcast, I usually go beat by beat, and I've got like notes with, I don't know, 60 some odd bullet points of what happens in each of the scenes. For 2001, for a movie that is, by the way, 2.5 hours, although it has an overture and an intermission, nevertheless, roughly 2.5 hours of footage, I have 24 bullet points. There is so little that happens in this movie in terms of individual incidents. It's stunning that with that, it has the weight that we're all talking about. So as I said, I watched it as a kid. Obviously, a lot of these bigger things went over my head. I was a little less interested in it because I wish they spent more time at Jupiter. And of course, the final sequence scared the shit out of me in a good way. Yeah. I loved it, but it was definitely like, oh boy, it's the part of the movie that's the hardest to watch. And every time I've gone back to it since, like, I love it even more. Like, there's so much to love about every frame of this thing. And people talk about Kubrick, right? Every frame of painting. That's this movie more than any of his others. I mean, just to freeze frame on any of it. Well, and again, we'll talk about like the special effects and like the visuals kind of as we go through it. But I did, because the plot is so thin, I kind of thought, we'd start off with, where we usually do is, we'll talk a lot about like kind of the overall things and themes and stuff, and then we'll do the plot recap, and then we'll kind of roughly wrap it up and be done. But here, I think we'll probably zip through the plot recap fairly quickly, and then I wanted to leave a lot of time at the end for us to really sink our teeth into the like incredibly dense thematic meat of this film. So with that, why don't we just kind of start that process? So we open with an overture, which features this film's soundtrack, none of which there was a score composed for this movie that Kubrick threw away in favor of the licensed tracks he had given that composer as like, here's some ideas for what this should sound like. He decided he liked that stuff best and used it. And again, the songs chosen for this movie, are at like linchpin. Like, that decision was enormous in terms of how this turned out. Anyway, we are introduced to part 1, The Dawn of Man. This takes place, of course, millions of years before humans, and we watch the life of early hominids. Their life in Africa is nasty, brutish, short, and surrounded by tapirs. And in one instance, we watch one of these poor Australopithecines get mauled by a jaguar who leaps on him from above in what can only be the greatest OSHA violation in film history.
Yeah, it's certainly a scene that stands out. Like, it's impressive in this whole sequence, and like we got to talk about this period because like, oh my God, they did. It's what, like 15 to 20 minutes long, and there's no dialogue. There's just 8 people just running around, and this was made as a contemporary with Planet of the Apes, and you can just see like very different ways of creating the effect of an ape person, like on film here. We get a thing which is like, we're gonna have to talk about this throughout this whole movie, but there's this balletic component to the movie. There's a lot, like they chose dancers for the apes here, and throughout the movie there's all this movement and motion and body work that goes into conveying the different environments that they're in, and this one is like the most straightforward, where it's people in monkey costumes, but it's like, it's so gosh darn cool looking, like, and the production value, I mean, like all the tapirs, like, just, it's production value, damn it. But then the jaguar attack like is freaky, and you watch this and you're like, yeah, no, that definitely was a trained jaguar attacking a person in a monkey costume. Like, there's like, it's a freakish sequence, but you're like, would Kubrick do it? Yep, Kubrick would do it.
They just don't make them like they used to. But even the way they're able to incorporate the sets with like the desert footage, it's really quite seamless. I mean, if you're looking for it, you can find it, and you can recognize some of those vibes of a 60s, sort of deserty sci-fi set. But it really looks incredible, and that background footage is so well selected. It adds to that realism, and you add the production value of those real animals, and it's really breathtaking. On paper, this should not be one of the most iconic moments in film. This should be a punchline. It should be a joke. But they're able to sell it. And certainly that music does a lot of the work. And I think as someone who came to the film later, just years and years of it being in the primordial soup of pop culture, I think helped prep me for it. But yeah, phenomenal stuff.
Randy, I'm so glad you made that last point, because that was something I was very much in touch with this time around, watching it with some more distance from the actual property and removed from that classroom setting where I was like putting on my big brain hat and wanting to be intellectual about it. I realized that some of the cultural preparation I had for this thing allowed me to accept it as it is, rather than receiving it as a punchline in the year 2000 and whatever it was when I first saw it, right? So I'm so glad you mentioned that, Randy. And Doug, Case, I'm glad you guys called out the tapirs, because I must have been exposed to maybe television aspects of this before when I was even younger, because for some reason, those animals in particular, I, at some point in my like semi-adulthood, had to accept that they were Earthbound animals and not Star Wars animals. The tapirs were actually real in our world, because something about like maybe the taillessness of them, like why don't they seem like they should have a bigger tail, and their noses are a little floppy because they're kind of anteater like. And I was like kind of like grown when I was like, oh, they're real, those animals. That's not a Star Wars animal as I thought that it was for some reason in my mind. That was a fun memory to revisit today.
My ex-girlfriend in my 20s loved tapirs. That was her favorite animal. And so I spent a lot of time in zoos looking at them, and they are strange. Like, they have this very like, there's that era of mammals that you'll see when you go across like a biology textbook of like, remember for like, I don't know, about 4 to 2 million years ago, everything got real fucking weird looking for a while. And like, this is an animal that feels like it's left over from that period. Like, it's very strange. But the realism, right? Like, this is not Planet of the Apes, which is going for a different, I mean, Planet of the Apes is a cool movie, but obviously those are, more sentient apes. They're different looking. This is all designed to be as realistic as possible. And there are obviously many long wordless sequences in this movie. And one of the reasons I think they work is there's an element of this that is like, this is Stanley Kubrick's camera as tourism, almost, just like, yeah, man, don't worry that nothing's happening. Holy shit, you're in a time machine getting to see what the world looked like a million years ago. Like, just take it in. And he lets that go. Anyway, so it's after this horrible scene of them getting some poor actor getting mauled, and then Stanley Kubrick going, "Great, let's do it again."
167 more times.
Yeah. I'm sure he's they're going telling Shelley Duvall, you got off easy. The other guy got mauled by a jaguar.
Yeah, I like to imagine the first time they didn't even tell him.
Yeah, they wanted the authentic reaction.
Yeah, it's definitely stuff you could not get away with now in terms of filming.
No.
But we're introduced to an ape I will refer to as Moonwatcher because that is what he's called in the book. This film, so it's not actually adapted from the book 2001. Stanley Kubrick had the idea for the movie based on a short story Arthur C. Clarke had written called The Sentinel. He then worked in tandem with Arthur C. Clarke, and they basically wrote the book and the screenplay at the same time. And the movie actually made it to the world first. The book was released shortly thereafter. And the movie was so much more popular than the book that when Arthur C. Clarke went to write 2010, it's a sequel to the movie, not his original book. So there's things that are different. Like, for example, in the book, they're going to Saturn and not Jupiter. And there's other little changes like that just get swept aside. Anyway, so we meet Moonwatcher. He's a member of this tribe of early hominids, and they are driven from their local watering hole by a more violent rival tribe. But one morning, he and his clan wake to find a towering black monolith just looming over this rock formation they call home, and Moonwatcher touches it in one of, again, the most iconic sequences in all of cinema. Yep. So this is our first time meeting the monolith and the musical cue that goes with the monolith. It's called Requiem for soprano, mezzo-soprano, two mixed choirs, and orchestra by a composer named György Ligeti. This is the scariest piece of music that exists. Anyway.
Yes. I hated this. I watched so much of this film in headphones. The sound design is incredible throughout, and we'll talk a lot about it. Much of it is disconcerting. This sound is terrifying.
Yeah, even that initial overture just over black, it prepares you for the type of movie you're going to sit for. It forces you to acknowledge that there is a soundtrack. It forces you to stop and think about it in a way that, like, especially in the present, we're not always primed to like sit down and think and process that way. So I love the way this movie is set up for that.
Yeah, I mean, I basically what you guys have said, like the nature of the music, it's so unsettling that you're just left just like on the back foot the entire time from the starting point. Like the overture at the beginning, like watching it most recently, I was like, wait. This seems like a little long. Like, is everything okay? Like, shouldn't the movie have started by this point? And I have to imagine that audiences felt like that too in theaters when first seeing this movie, because it's just this very uncomfortable score, and it comes back for the monolith every time, and it's just this blackness that overwhelms you, and somehow in musical form.
Yeah, I was talking to I was out with some friends not that long ago, and we were talking about this movie. I had it on the brain for this podcast, and it's stunning how well the monolith works. I mean, we'll talk about it later. I have this as a point in my bullet points, like, is this a horror movie? And this is a fucking rectangle. It's a big black rectangle, and it's the scariest thing you've ever seen. Like, how does Stanley Kubrick turn a simple geometric shape into an object of horror? And the score here is a huge part of it, because I mean, you've heard it in the clip I just played, but it's this howling vortex of different voices in a choir. I think using human voices, a discordant swirl of voices to represent this alien artifact is so brilliant, because it could have been a million different sci-fi sounds. It may not have been very synthy sounding in 1968, but you can imagine something more pew pew, electronic for something like this. So it's just such a brilliant juxtaposition to make you just feel very ill at ease around this thing that is, again, a motionless rectangle. It's just sitting there doing nothing. And it's terrifying.
It sort of reminds me, the voices, it sort of reminded me of like the Halo, like Gregorian chants taken and like thrown into a blender and allowed to just mash up and become something so opposite of that Halo vibe that you get. It almost resonates like buzzing bees, like the chaotic anxiety of buzzing bees. It's very, very bad.
Yeah, and then even you pair that with like those sweeping shots of the desert, of all these rock formations. They're like these smooth, rounded shapes. It really like prepares you visually to just get hit by that stark rectangle.
Yeah, and good choice to make it a big black rectangle in the book. I think originally as conceived, it was going to be a more crystalline object, like a dodecahedron or something. I think having it be, first of all, black, as it makes it really striking against the background and everything else in the scene with it. And then there is a cute idea that's introduced in 2010, which is that the dimensions of the monolith are 1x4x9, the perfect squares of 1, 2, 3, which is a very like Carl Sagan idea that, even though language would be very different from, one planet to another, math would not be. And therefore math is the perfect like universal language. So just a fun note about that. All right. So sometime later, Moonwatcher is playing around with some kind of a jawbone, and he realizes it can be used as a tool. And we get this triumphant smashing montage of him crushing all these bones, set to the also sprach Zarathustra music by Richard Strauss, which is every bit as uplifting and powerful as the monolith music is terrifying. And he then leads his tribe to victory over their rivals. And he tosses the bone in celebration. And I'll stop right there, because there's obviously something very notable about when he tosses that thing in the air. But we'll finish up this segment with the apes here.
Before we move on from the apes, there's one theme that we set up in this period that will continue on, at least for the next chunk, which is the theme of food. Like I had forgotten that there is an extended sequence of all the whatever form of Australopithecus or whatever creature it was that was just nomming on some red meat. And that is a thing that when we get into the later periods, we see how mankind eats in every sort of setup as a way of sort of creating this mundane component of this relatable aspect of each time period that we're sort of looking on. And it struck me that we get that intro here as well.
Really interesting. I love that you called that out. I definitely noted the food throughout and the different forms that it was taking via straw, a little tray like it was an airplane meal, until we finally see like the proper meal at the end. But for me, I couldn't get past the sequence. I'm glad you went back to the red meat case, because before they go conquer their rivals, they kill an animal. They realize they can use this thing to kill this thing, which has been competing with them for resources, right? We see the tape here, like they have to chase it off and get it out of the bush and stop it from eating whatever it is that these creatures would have hunted and gathered for themselves, right? Now they can actually hunt. Now they can kill this thing, and it's a huge leap forward for them. But it brought me back to the triumphant music that you said, Doug, like that triumphant moment of smashing with the bone. It's not a tool. It's very quickly realized to be a weapon, right? He's breaking some things, and then he smashes a skull, which directly translates then to killing the animal. He realized this bone can be used to do this thing. I recently wrote like a couple of lines. It struck me that I said, should and could are often miles apart. One is the strong arm, and the other's the heart. It's the burden of man, the fact that we can. And we usually fail because we start. And I was watching this, and that was like on my mind so deeply, because like these poor creatures, the moment they can, they have the strength to do it. Should is a foregone conclusion. Should is not even in their minds. And it was just like seeing that back then in these animals who become violent in the face of the ability to be violent, to take for themselves what they need, to protect what they think is theirs and should be theirs. And how even when we become a computer in HAL 9000, that sense of self-preservation, that ability to be violent with our capabilities is still so deeply in us. We don't evolve past that, no matter how close to Jupiter we can get with our technology. Devastating. It's not triumphant at all. It's for me, the saddest part of the movie. Moment.
I think you're right. I think we're supposed to question the benefits of the monolith's gift of evolution here, because that's what the monolith ultimately is. It's some kind of a device that sparks evolution, because we're meant to connect Moonwatcher touching the monolith to his later eureka moment with the bone. But as you said, Kris, it's a moment of not only inspiration, but it's inspiration towards violence, and and violence as supremacy. So, and of course, we're now at the most famous match cut in film history, where we jump from like 1 million BC to 1999 AD as the bone on screen is replaced by a space station in orbit. And
somewhere a college film professor got his wings.
Yes, of course. This, it's what gets talked about. We got to talk about it. It's a very neat match cut. Anyway, as amazing as it is, it doesn't. It's just cool. Like it's Kubrick doing something cool because he can, and he thought of it, and it was neat. But we're treated to a ballet of spacecraft, and set to The Blue Danube by Johann Strauss, a different Strauss than the one who wrote also Sprach Zarathustra. No relation, just another Strauss who writes music. But we get The Blue Danube, again, a very famous piece of classical music. And we meet Heywood Floyd, who arrives at one of these space stations and makes a video call home to his daughter, who wants a bush baby for her birthday.
Hello. How are you, Squirt? What are you doing?
Playing.
Where's Mummy?
Gone to shopping.
Oh, who's taking care of you?
Rachel.
May I speak to Rachel, please?
She's gone to the bathroom. Are you coming to my party tomorrow?
I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I can't.
Why not?
You know, Daddy's traveling. Very sorry about it, but I just can't.
Oh.
I'm going to send you a very nice present, though.
All right.
Anything special that you want?
Yes.
What?
A telephone.
We got lots of telephones already. Can't you think of anything else you want for your birthday? Something very special?
Yes.
What?
A bush baby.
A bush baby? Well, we'll have to see about that. Listen, sweetheart, I want you to tell Mummy something for me. Will you remember?
Yes.
Well, tell Mummy that I telephoned, okay?
Yes.
That I'll try to telephone again tomorrow. Now, will you tell her that?
Yes.
Okay, sweetheart. Now, have a nice birthday tomorrow.
All right.
And have a nice birthday party tomorrow, too, huh?
All right.
Okay, now take care and be a good girl, won't you?
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Happy birthday.
And we find out that Dr. Floyd is the chairman of the United States National Council of Aeronautics, basically the big mucky muck at what this film would call NASA. And this is our introduction to him. But again, we need to talk about, I guess, this space ballet, which is, this is, again, Kubrick's camera as tourism. Like, it's just beautiful to watch.
Yeah. So obviously the miniature work that goes into the spacecraft is just astonishing. It's a decade ahead of its time. The next competitor is Star Wars, like I said, a whole 10 years later in terms of creating anything that's as compelling on screen. But I really want to call attention to the body work that is going on in terms of selling the zero gravity in the like for the stewardess as she like moves through, and they do the quick cut to like the Velcro shoes that she's wearing, and then as she moves, she has this very controlled kind of issue with her weightlessness that is entirely being just conveyed by someone who clearly has movement training to do this, because obviously you're filming in an actual weighted environment and trying to sell this as being a weightless scenario. And then the actor who's and I'm blanking on the name of the guy, but our main dude here,
William Sylvester is Haywood Floyd.
Yeah. So Floyd, like his arm is like seemingly floating while he's asleep, and clearly that's him just like faking it in terms of action. But like this is such like good like directorial details to be like, okay, so we're going to convey that you're in a weightless environment because we're going to have you pretend to be asleep, but your arm is lifted up and you have to hold that shot for however long it takes to get the scene in there. And then they have like the pen floating, and that's on like a piece of glass, I think is the deal for that one to simulate that sort of sequence right there. It's just they're doing like all kinds of trickery, and a lot of that is in the actors really pulling off just very like I said, simple but difficult to like maintain kinds of effects to convey this weightlessness.
I'm glad you shouted out the pen moment. For some reason, her reaching to pluck that pen really stood out to me in this watch. She was a highlight for me in terms of her movement capability. This film, this sequence especially, is like seems to be a celebration of dance. I don't know what relationship Kubrick had to dancers in his life, to this kind of performance art, but he seems to have a real reverence for it, the way it comes across in this film. I couldn't help but like wrestle with the truth that my wife would not enjoy the cinematic experience as a whole. I could never convince her to watch this movie, but feeling desperate, my wife, who's a dance studio owner and dancer herself with a love and passion for this, how much she would appreciate these sequences. I have to at least show her this because the footwork is beautiful. Everything about their movement is both telling the story and celebrating the craft of dance itself in conjunction with the music that's playing.
Yeah, and the way they landed the ship on that pen shot in particular, it's just so prophetic, like at a time where people have not seen a lot of imagery of weightlessness. That feels so real. Watching that image of the pen floating, and then sold by the actress. Beautiful stuff.
Looks way better than the billionaire floating in his space station in Contact, I can tell you that.
Oh, so so much better. Yeah, easily the worst CGI moment of that film. But yeah, just like the way they create scale in this movie too. Case already mentioned like the miniatures, in the way that they're using all the film tricks available just to like, get that one little frame of a shot in a small corner to create the sense of the scope of this giant space station with a giant piece coming down. And it still looks incredible. It still stands up. I will take that over an AI generated film any day.
Yeah, see this on the biggest screen you can. Because it is, every time you have to like kind of slap yourself and go like, they did this in 1968. It looks so good. In some ways, it looks even better than Star Wars does 10 years later, largely because I think Star Wars is not going for realism, and also Star Wars is very kinetic in a way this is not. Like they can take their time and kind of, make things look stately, and they don't need a million lasers going off and spaceships flying in different places. So they can kind of make this they go for realism. We haven't talked. We'll get to the Discovery when we get to the next segment of the movie. Sure. But the miniature for the Discovery, I think, was like 55 feet long. So they could really get a lot of detail out of that thing as they shot it. But some of these miniatures are bigger, some of them are smaller, but they all contribute to this overwhelming sense of like beauty and ballet in the way that, we'll question again about like, well, human evolution did get us here. Like, this is beautiful and awesome, but it's paired with mundanity, right? Like, while you are marveling, especially again in an audience in 1968, can't believe their eyes in terms of watching all of this beauty taking place in the skies. Heywood Floyd is sleeping through it. Like, this is a Tuesday, it's become banal. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, you saying mundanity is the exact term I was trying to build towards, because then the next thing that we get is the call that you referenced to the daughter. And like, that is part of what this movie is doing. It's trying to have it feel like a lived in world by way of having people be bored by the world that they're in.
No, it's like, oh man, no matter how far we get, no how advanced we are, Dad's still going to miss his girl's birthday for work. That bummer.
Right.
That little girl, by the way, is Vivian Kubrick. That is his daughter. And that he gave her that little part, which is cute.
Yes.
What was I going to say before? So getting to like mundanity, the dialogue here is also profoundly mundane. And I don't mean that as a negative, right? That with the exception of some like very memorable interchanges between Dave Bowman and Hal that we'll get to at the end that are kind of iconic now. For the most part, the dialogue is very workmanlike, perfunctory, in a way that's meant to convey, again, absolute realism. The way these people talk is not the way characters in cinema talk. And it's huge credit to Kubrick and Clark on the script to get that across, because that could potentially drag the movie down, but it doesn't. Like, it makes you, again, you feel like a spectator watching something happen for real.
Yeah.
And so we get to this notable conversation that Floyd has. He meets some of these colleagues who, they all sit down in these bright red, very mod chairs in a part of the space station. And they are very curious about the fact that there is no contact with this lunar base over a place called Clavius. And they're being told this cover story that there's an epidemic going on, and that's why communications are cut. And they try to probe Floyd about what's going on, and he basically dismisses and deflects and kind of just never really fully answers a question before kind of bidding them farewell.
Well, for one thing, whenever you phone the base, all you can get is a recording which repeats that the phone lines are temporarily out of order.
Well, probably having some trouble with their equipment or something like that.
Yes. Yes, that's what we thought was the explanation at first, but it's been going on now for the past 10 days.
You mean you haven't been able to contact anyone for the past 10 days?
That's right.
Oh, I see.
Well, there's another thing, Heywood. 2 days ago, one of our rocket buses was denied permission for emergency landing at Clavius.
Well, that does sound odd.
Yes. I'm afraid there's going to be a bit of a row about it. Denying the men permission to land is a direct violation of the IAS convention.
Yes, of course. Will the crew get back all right?
Yes, fortunately they did.
Oh, I'm glad about that.
Dr. Floyd, at the risk of pressing you on a point you seem reticent to discuss, may I ask you a straightforward question?
Well, certainly.
Quite frankly, we have had some very reliable intelligence reports that quite a serious epidemic has broken out at Clavius. Something apparently of an unknown origin. Is this in fact what has happened?
Sorry, Dr. Smithlow, but I'm really not at liberty to discuss this.
So yeah, it's an interesting scene. I also want to point out the main guy who Floyd is talking to. I don't know if he's Ray Fiennes' father or what, but holy shit. This is the second instance on this podcast this year of a time traveling actor. We had this guy who looks exactly like Frankie Muniz in Legend.
Yes.
And now we have like Ray Fiennes before there was Ray Fiennes in this quick scene in 2001.
Can I tell you why I love this sequence so much? It's another one of those moments that makes this film so timeless because, you don't know the characters yet. And as the scene starts, you take the kind exchanges at face value. And as the scene goes on, you realize it is this fake level of professional nice. You start to see the undercurrent of what these relationships really are, that there are power dynamics and structures here. And yes, these people have worked amicably together in the past, but there is always this struggle for resources, for information. We're one step away from Cold War politics, I'm watching this scene and, I mentioned Dr. Strangelove earlier, but I'm watching these colleagues try to gather information, try to get Floyd to have a drink, sit down, do the professional nice. But I'm just thinking, gentlemen, we cannot have a mine shaft gap, is where I feel like everyone's coming from. And I love seeing that. And, politics change, but you can apply that to the present so easily. And it goes back to what Kris was saying earlier about the tribalism of those ancient tribes. It's this timeless human thing that we have to figure out how to deal with, I guess.
Yeah, Randy, I think that's really well said. I had observed something similar in that it is like an international group of friends, right? So there's no like one other interest being represented there. And there is this like optimistic, futuristic thing that we tend to assume, in the future, there'll be all this cooperation, all this scientific cooperation across the globe. Like we just saw in Fantastic Four, right? How quickly everyone will just collaborate, right? Or even in Contact, this like global collaboration to achieve a thing as humanity. And like on the surface, that's what you're observing. But very quickly, as the dialogue continues, you realize, nope, still humans. Yep. Still humans with that undercurrent of mistrust, that undercurrent of suspicion, and that sense of competition that we can't seem to shake.
Case, any thoughts on this scene before I move on?
Well, yeah, I mean, I love the scene in general. I think from an acting standpoint, the degree of tension that arises as the questions become more directed and more point blank about the loss of communication, and as Floyd is like, I am not at liberty to say, and like, sort of like comes out and says like, no, I do know, I can't say anything. And I think it's a really like just good scenario of tension in a dialogue scene.
Yeah. There's never any escalation of emotion from anybody. Like the other guy just sort of accepts professionally, like, well, okay, I've asked my questions directly, you've given me answers directly. We're going to now shake hands. We're going to move on. And I'm going to reiterate my standing invitation to you at my home, other woman. Very interesting to me throughout this film. All the dialogue is quite bereft of any sort of urgency of emotion.
Yeah, really the only emotion that we start to get is a little later on when things get tense between Hal and Bowman. And then obviously Keir Dullea acting as Bowman at the end of the film is very intense. But by and large, you're right? The emotional needle never gets above like a 2 for the most part. And again, I think that's very deliberate. And again, a very neat trick of Kubrick to pull off a movie where people usually you're relying on like when's somebody going to lose their shit, because that's what makes a movie go, and like that doesn't happen here. All right, so we get a second space ballet as Floyd makes his way from this orbiting space station to the moon, where there is a base, and he arrives and he addresses some sort of room full of brass to give them a debriefing, which is that there was some kind of unusual electromagnetism detected from a crater called Tycho, coming specifically from beneath the crater. So they excavated it and found an object that could only have been deliberately placed there, i.e. from aliens.
Now, I'm sure you're all aware of the extremely grave potential for cultural shock and social disorientation contained in this present situation, if the facts were prematurely and suddenly made public without adequate preparation and conditioning. Anyway, this is the view of the Council. The purpose of my visit here is to gather additional facts and opinions on the situation, and to prepare a report to the Council, recommending when and how the news should eventually be announced. Now, if any of you would like to give me your views and opinions, in private if you like, I'd be only too happy to include them in my report. Well, I think that's about it. Any questions?
And that, again, this is just pure exposition. The most fantastic discovery in the history of human existence, relayed again at an emotional level of 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mundanity is a huge part here. Like everyone is like, this is just, this might be the most breakthrough thing of all time, but we're not getting excited about it.
Yeah.
It's like they're driven purely scientifically, right? There's a small sense of delight in the man who's conveying this information to our Dr. Floyd, where he's kind of like, yeah, we don't know anything other than it certainly has been buried for 4 million years. And like, there's like a little bit of a delight in that you can detect, but it's almost just like to your point, it's a 2. It's a very polite curiosity. Huh, isn't that interesting? Yeah. But we're not going to jump to any excited conclusions about this. We're not going to speculate what this could mean. We're not going to seem excited at all about that. We're just going to, isn't that a little bit curious?
Now, I could be bringing my lived experience of 2026 into this a little too much, but I do feel a lot of like institutional fear in that meeting and the follow-up conversations, because these folks have a very reasonable concern that they've been forced to abruptly cut off contact with everyone they care about back home, with absolutely no indication of when they can let that ruse go. So they've got people back home thinking they're dead. They're trying to broach that question. They're not getting the answers they deserve. And it feels more like fear than genuine scientific curiosity that, to me, that has them keeping their mouth shut. But maybe I've just seen too many people capitulate to the powers that be. I'm projecting that. Yeah.
I mean, maybe the silent people, maybe those silent people in that room, right? The ones who are receiving the message. But I do think that Floyd's doing like his best sort of optimistic accent, that mid-Atlantic thing he's sort of doing. He's doing a sort of almost a Kennedy impression in his little speech there. Sure. And to your point, maybe the powers aren't quite as in touch with the anxiety of the people, but it is in the conversation right afterward. It's almost in a very passing way. Oh, that was nice what you said. I'm sure that was a boost to morale. And they all, like I said, just it's a 2. Everything about it is a 2.
I think I also can't help but notice that, he got to have a chat with his daughter. That's
Well, I mean, that perfunctory thing kind of continues, right? Because our next scene is we are traveling across the moon in this floating vehicle to the tune of a track called Lux Eterna. Is that right? I have it right here. Another one by Ligeti, same guy who wrote the Monolith music. And this is kind of a piece with it. Like, it's unsettling and minor key, but not nearly as bombastic and terrifying as the Monolith music. But it feels like almost a prelude to that as we, move across the barren, kind of scary landscape of the moon. But while that's happening, the team is just kind of making small talk over, who's going to have an egg salad sandwich.
Oh, anybody hungry?
Great. What do we got?
You name it.
What's that, chicken?
Something like that. Tastes the same anyway.
Got any ham?
Ham.
Oh, yeah, that's good. They look pretty good.
Well, they're getting better at it all the time.
That was an excellent speech you gave us, Haywood.
It certainly was.
I'm sure it beefed up morale a hell of a lot.
Thanks, Ralph. Oh, by the way, I wanted to say to both of you, I think you've done a wonderful job. I appreciate the way you've handled this thing.
Well, the way we look at it, it's our job to do this thing the way you want it done. We're only too happy to be able to oblige.
Have you seen these yet?
What are they?
Yeah, have a look at this.
Here's what started the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
When we first found it, we thought it might be an outcrop of magnetic rock, but all the geological evidence was against it. And not even a big nickel iron meteorite could produce a field as intense as this. So we decided to have a look.
We thought it might be the upper part of some buried structure, so we excavated out on all sides, but unfortunately we didn't find anything else.
And what's more, the evidence seems pretty conclusive that it hasn't been covered up by natural erosion or other forces. It seems to have been deliberately buried.
Deliberately buried.
And this goes back to that eating thing you were mentioning before, Case. Like, again, they're on
Yeah.
their way to first fucking contact, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna have an egg salad sandwich." Like, no one's talking about the extraordinary implications of this discovery.
Right. I mean, like, it obviously the trip takes a long time, and like they're going to have to eat some food along the way. Like, that makes enough sense. But it is really interesting how, like, we got that we had in that second space ballet, we got the the zero gravity food situation where they have like the tubes and so forth, or like the sip up boxes,
the toilet with the 15 million instructions.
Oh yeah, the toilet was amazing. I love that part. Yeah. And here, I think that we're focusing on these moments to sort of make it a relatable scene, but one where it is just as lived in as possible by way of seeing them in the moments of boredom as opposed to the excitement. Because I'm sure they were talking about it like once they were on their way, no longer being like listened in, because there's certainly some degree of secrecy that they're keeping. But like once they were on their way, and no longer like potentially being like overheard by anyone on the station that they left from. They probably had a much longer conversation. We're not watching it. We're watching them in the moments of the quiet, just everyday life components.
Right. That's the moment Kubrick chooses to show us, right? He doesn't show us if they did have a more lofty conversation. He didn't give us that. He just gave us the egg salad sandwich conversation. And that is, of course, to a point. But now we arrive at Tycho Crater, and another iconic sequence as the team walks down this ramp to the excavation point where there is another, presumably a different monolith than the one we saw back in Africa. And the Ligeti music starts up, and the team is, they're walking around, they're taking pictures, it's interesting. And once again, one of the astronauts, probably Floyd, but we can't see because of the masks, touches it. And an instant later, there is an ear-splitting shriek, or like a signal, I guess. It's a pure tone that's very high-pitched. And despite the vacuum of space, it must be electromagnetic because everybody can hear it. Everybody's putting their hands up to their helmets, from the sound of this horrible thing.
I want to call out again, just talking about the mundanity of it all, the photographer who has like this very weird, it looks like he has to like shake the camera every time he takes a picture, but it's this very like drawn out motion to take each shot. And it's very slow and methodic. And eventually we get them like getting together for like the full group shot of it. But it's like just that detail to like have the photographer here, and they had like the videographer in the briefing room before they actually like did the briefing, which I thought was just like a nice detail. But like it's again just like showing details of the world to make it feel more lived in.
And even in the middle of an epidemic cover story, like you got to take those publicity photos, like.
Right.
That is there. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. Maybe they're just trying to, professionally document this scientific discovery. But there does seem to be a layer of we got to get the photos of the meeting. We got to make it all look nice for the books and the eventual press release someday in the future.
I think you're spot on. I think that photo definitely stands in contrast to the secrecy of the now in preparation for the inevitable. If this is what we think it is, boy, are we going to be famous. So let's get this cool photo.
Doug, you posited, like, is this a horror movie? And one thing I love about this, not to get ahead, but we're going to jump forward again soon. You're just left to assume, like, did all these guys die? That's a reasonable expectation until we, get some level of confirmation later in the film that at least one person was okay. But I love that it leaves you with such a jarring question in that moment.
Yeah, that's true. We never find out what happens to any of these people except for Floyd, who we'll get a broadcast from later. So, he survived. And I get the impression, from piecing together what we think is happening with the monolith, I suspect these people are all fine. It's the horror of this movie for the most part. I think, again, we're going to have a much longer discussion on that, I think, later when we get to the end, is a different kind of horror. It's, it's existential in a way. It's less than, immediate violence. So, but yes, as you said, we jump ahead again, and we go to the next, title segment of the movie. It is now the year 2001. and we are following this huge sperm of a spaceship called the Discovery. I'm joking, but it is beautiful. Like it is, but it happens to have a kind of a bulbous circle at the front of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the sperm, Doug. We get the sperm later.
Yeah.
Well, I was the flight attendant, the ballet flight attendant in her uniform earlier. I was very sperm like. I didn't want to take us there, but it's all throughout the film.
Yeah.
And so now we're kind of getting a little slice of life aboard the Discovery. We watch Dave Bowman, that's Keir Dullea playing him, and Frank Poole, his second in command, played by Gary Lockwood. Bowman is jogging around the inner perimeter of the ship, again using that gimbal to simulate zero gravity.
Yeah, we haven't actually talked that much about that component of it. The use of centrifugal force in their spacecraft to simulate gravity, and then using these circular sets and gimbals to do these like really awesome shots with it all. There's just such great trick photography going on in terms of creating it. But while at the same time embracing what the practicalities of how these kind of crafts would be. Like there's just so much work put into the world of this movie.
Yeah. All of the set design, right, is just absolutely incredible. If I didn't already call it Doug Trumbull on the special effects, the art design also, like they went to these guys who did like actual kind of technical designs for things like NASA, like trying to get the realism right.
Yeah.
Because some of the things we see here in this first kind of slice of life aboard the Discovery, we see Bowman jogs past these three other crew members who are in cryosleep in these like big space sarcophagi along the route that he's running. We see all of the different computer bays and things. We get, and we're about to get introduced to Hal. And so Bowman comes over to where Poole is eating, and they watch this broadcast of an interview with themselves and introducing their ship-bound AI, HAL 9000, still the great granddaddy of all evil AIs in science fiction.
You're the brain and central nervous system of the ship, and your responsibilities include watching over the men in hibernation. Does this ever cause you any lack of confidence?
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
Hal, despite your enormous intellect, are you ever frustrated by your dependence on people to carry out actions?
Not in the slightest bit. I enjoy working with people. I have a stimulating relationship with Dr. Poole and Dr. Bowman. My mission responsibilities range over the entire operation of the ship, so I am constantly occupied. I am putting myself to the fullest possible use, which is all I think that any conscious entity can ever hope to do.
Dr. Poole, what's it like living for the better part of a year in such close proximity with Hal?
Well, it's pretty close to what you said about him earlier. He is just like a sixth member of the crew. Very quickly get adjusted to the idea that he talks, and you think of him really just as another person.
In talking to the computer, one gets the sense that he is capable of emotional responses. For example, when I asked him about his abilities, I sensed a certain pride in his answer about his accuracy and perfection. Do you believe that Hal has genuine emotions?
Well, he acts like he has genuine emotions. Of course, he's programmed that way to make it easier for us to talk to him. But as to whether or not he has real feelings is something I don't think anyone can truthfully answer.
And I think really cannily, the interviewer asks Dave Bowman, does Hal experience emotions? And Bowman wisely says, I don't know that we can ever know the answer to that question. One thing I do have to ping here is they mention that Hal has a perfect operational record, which is important.
Yeah, just like the idea that like they really want to believe that Hal is a tool. So like Dave starts with, he's programmed that way to make it easier for us to interact with him, which again, so prophetic. That's sort of the case with how AI interacts with us or your Alexa device or whatever. But yeah, then he does kind of give a brief pause on that more existential question. I don't know if anyone can say for sure. Like, they've been creeped out by Hal already before things start to go south, for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in relation to modern AIs. Like, for so long, this movie seemed to be just an example of like really like excellent design work, but at the same time missing the mark in terms of like the actual march of progress, just by way of like, it couldn't have predicted cell phones. So like 2001 looked very different from the way that this world looks in this movie. But at the same time, now we're really dealing with AIs that are programmed to sort of placate our emotions and in some case make us horny. Like, it's a weird world that we're existing in now, that it is more authentic than I had believed for a long time. And like, interacting with the modern AIs is doing such a similar job to what we're getting with Hal, that I guess it gets down to this epiphany I had, which is that it ultimately comes down to it is human error that creates the situation that Hal goes insane. But the reason why is because of it being an introduced conflict in his internal logic, that by virtue of them having this like classified document that goes on. I find that fascinating because it gets into the point that Hal isn't really going insane because it's not really a person, but it's programmed to feel like it's going insane. And that I find is this extra layer of like, so what's actually going on here, man?
Yeah, I have that as a bullet point to talk about after we're done with the plot recap. What is the reason Hal does what he does? Because the movie doesn't explicitly say anything. There is canon in 2010 and the follow-up franchise stuff that does try to give here is a canon explanation for what happened. But either way, ultimately, Hal is created by humans, and therefore humans are ultimately responsible for what he does. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes into like Hal's psychology. Is it psychology? Is he sentient? The movie asks us to wonder, is this the kind of AI that just, is a plagiarism machine that imitates humans to placate us, or does he have actual sentience? Again, Bowman wisely states it's impossible to know. But just to the form factor here, the fact that Hal is one, of course, the rectangle is not, lost on anybody. That is the same shape as the monolith, but also like having him be just this black circle with a red LED light in the middle. Something very disquieting about that. I mean, everything about this movie is disquieting. That's kind of the overall tone, but they could have made him, again, if he was designed to, it's going to make us easier to interact with him. They could have given him a face, they could have made him look more human. Instead, no, he's just this like unblinking eye. I mean, every time they zoom in on it, it's scarier and scarier.
I did bring one very English teacher question on this topic, but I'll save it for the thematic discussion later because I think it's going to be a good companion for your prompts.
I'm glad you called out the design of that red eye, though, because this was the first time that it struck me. Because I said I watched this a long time ago, and I wasn't yet a deep comic book reader. But this is a direct influence on the brother eye that would come into the Batman world. Batman's own sort of all-seeing, all-knowing big brother AI that has been the subject of a number of sort of like futuristic stories that they've told in the Batman world. Brother Eye is a nice big round red eye, and it's very clearly taken from Hal.
Not to mention every sci-fi robot always having the capacity for their eyes to glow red when they turn evil. You gotta love that. I
mean, again, amazing that like, for all the amazing special effects in this movie, the two scariest things in it, a rectangle and one red LED light. Like that's the power of directing, that he can do that to you. So we watch the crew kill time. Poole gets a tan and gets a birthday message from back home. And Bowman plays chess with Hal, who beats him. And Bowman shows Hal some sketches he's been working on. And Hal says, "Oh, those are very good." And then Hal, unprompted, kind of brings up his misgivings about the strange circumstances surrounding their mission, including but not limited to the fact that it was put together so hastily, the amount of secrecy involved, to the point that the 3 cryogenically frozen astronauts were put aboard that way, and not frozen after they were already on their way to Jupiter.
Do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, not at all.
Well, forgive me for being so inquisitive. But during the past few weeks, I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
How do you mean?
Well, it's rather difficult to define. Perhaps I'm just projecting my own concern about it. I know I've never completely freed myself of the suspicion that there are some extremely odd things about this mission. I'm sure you'll agree there's some truth in what I say.
Well, I don't know. That's a rather difficult question to answer.
You don't mind talking about it, do you, Dave?
No, not at all.
Well, certainly no one could have been unaware of the very strange stories floating around before we left. Rumors about something being dug up on the moon. I never gave these stories much credence, but particularly in view of some of the other things that have happened, I find them difficult to put out of my mind. For instance, the way all our preparations were kept under such tight security, and the melodramatic touch of putting Doctors Hunter, Kimball, and Kaminsky aboard, already in hibernation after 4 months of separate training on their own.
You're working up your crew psychology report.
Of course I am. Sorry about this. I know it's a bit silly.
And so we have this, and then immediately Hal says, just a moment. And he reports that a module inside their main antenna is going to fail within 72 hours. And he suggests they should go and check it out. So I'll stop there until we get to the next segment. But this is obviously a very consequential conversation between Bowman and Hal.
Whether or not he is recreating or mimicking human emotion. That was the nuanced language we got in that first interview, right? They kind of stopped themselves mid-sentence to say he recreates, or maybe more appropriately mimics, human emotion. There's a moment in this communication where he's describing that secrecy that he's so troubled by. I'm calling him he as opposed to it, Hal. And he uses the word melodrama or melodramatic when he's describing that decision to put these 4 astronauts in cryo before they're loaded on to the mission. And I thought that's an interesting emotional value assessment of this thing that he's discussing. And I don't know if that's mimicry or if it is recreation of human emotion, but it was interesting to me, the choice to have him, despite Hal never really emotes with his voice, right? Like the voice will be modulated later through physical acts, like technological means.
Yeah.
But Hal's voice doesn't modulate when he's expressing things, no matter what it is that he's talking about, whether it's displeasure, pleasure, or concern. You know, he's not monotone, but he doesn't modulate either with emotion.
He's always at a 2.
Yeah, he's always at a 2.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to me that they chose to allow him to use descriptive language like that, which maybe that the tone doesn't change, but the language certainly indicates an emotional assessment of the thing.
Yeah. Also want to shout out Hal's voice actor, Douglas Rain, who didn't do a whole lot in terms of acting. He was mostly like a narrator for, documentary films and things like that. And his voice performance here, one of the greatest VO performances ever given because of that restraint. I'm sure there was a huge temptation to, make it a robot voice, but they didn't do that. And he never, like you said, he never gets out of that range of being above a 2, although in some ways he shows more emotion than a lot of the other humans in the movie, especially when things start getting, dire. Like he does seem genuinely concerned about some of these mysteries and what's being kept from him and the crew. And it's a question I think, Case, you meant there's this logic bomb idea that, again, the franchise will confirm later is the reason for his murderous acts that we're about to get into. But the film doesn't actually confirm whether Hal is aware of the true purpose of their mission or not.
Well, the recording says that Hal is aware.
It's the recording says it. Yeah. I don't know though. There's a question of like, is Hal structured in a way that information is locked off to himself? There's all these weird questions about like, cause if Hal really knows, then why is he even having this conversation with Bowman? Right. What's the purpose of this? And again, I want to say there's a whole section of this we'll save for, I want to delving into why Hal does what he does, but it's interesting here. We're getting that thread.
Yeah, I'm biting my tongue really hard right now.
I know. We'll get there. I think that why Hal does what he does is one of the most central questions of the whole thing. So, so a pod is used for an EVA to go out and retrieve the module from the antenna. Again, one of these long wordless sequences, just a lot of heavy breathing as the astronauts go and retrieve this thing. And they get back and they test it and they measure what they test against another HAL unit back on Earth. And they are told that their HAL unit is in error predicting this fault. They can't find anything wrong with this module at all. And so HAL, they ask the onboard HAL, what's going on? And HAL's assessment is he thinks it's human error of some kind and suggests they reinstall the module and then just let it fail naturally. And then they'll be able to confirm exactly what the problem is. So Bowman and Poole go into a pod to discuss these circumstances. And unfortunately, they assume incorrectly that Hal can't hear them. And they decide if
they're correct about that. It's just
he
that
can't hear them. Exactly.
He can't perceive them. They're incorrect.
Right. Yeah. They decide if it's confirmed that their HAL unit has made an error, that they will need to disconnect his higher brain functions, which Hal he doesn't overhear it, but he can watch their lips move as the camera shows us from Hal's point of view as they talk back and forth.
You know, of course, though, he's right about the 9000 series having a perfect operational record. They do.
Unfortunately, that sounds a little like famous last words.
Yeah. Still, it was his idea to carry out the failure mode analysis, wasn't it? Should certainly indicate his integrity and self-confidence. If he were wrong, it would be the surest way of proving it.
It would be if he knew he was wrong. Look, Dave, I can't put my finger on it, but I sense something strange about him.
Still, I can't think of a good reason not to put back the number 1 unit and carry on with the failure mode analysis.
No, I agree about that.
Well, let's get on with it.
Okay. But look, Dave. Let's say we put the unit back and it doesn't fail, huh? That would pretty well wrap it up as far as Hal was concerned, wouldn't it?
Well, we'd be in very serious trouble.
We would, wouldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
What the hell could we do?
Well, we wouldn't have too many alternatives.
I don't think we'd have any alternatives. There isn't a single aspect of ship operations that's not under his control. If he were proven to be malfunctioning, I wouldn't see how we'd have any choice but disconnection.
I'm afraid I agree with you.
There'd be nothing else to do.
And this is where we go into intermission. So I'll stop there. Again, hugely consequential sequence here.
I feel as though Hal, whatever his purposes are for this ruse that he's apparently putting on about this malfunctioning component, perhaps it's not a ruse, but it may be a ruse in that I find it suspicious when he notes, I never noticed this before, when he notes, certainly you can afford to be out of communication long enough to fix it if it does fail.
Right.
It's like, oh, was he already trying to manipulate a circumstance where he could kill everybody on board? I don't know. But that struck me for the first time where he notes like, yeah, you just let it fail. And then certainly you can afford to be out of communication long enough to get it back up and running again.
Yeah, again, a huge question in my notes is when does Hal make the decision to go haywire here? And I really love, again, getting to the design thing. The design of these pods is so cool. These large I don't know what to call this shape. They're roughly round, but not quite.
Yeah.
Those two very like iconic things with the kind of different black circles on them on each side of them. The claws with the multiple like appendages. All of it is just, really, really well thought out and feels very real.
I love those Rock'em Sock'em robot arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with the grabbers and everything,
you
still see we haven't changed our ideas about what that would and should look like if we were to create this kind of technology. I think about Armageddon and that film and all the lunar modules they had, or the rovers they had on that big asteroid, and these kind of very claw-like simple joints. All that design work is still living in our sci-fi today.
I hate to break this to y'all, but this is an example of carcinization, but on like a technological scale, because effectively what we're doing is we're creating space crabs by way of it being very stocky kind of body that is very secure and safe to function in. And then these sort of appendages that extend out and function as grabbing arms.
Space crabs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we also just acknowledge that they're totally adorable? I don't think that's a mistake.
They do seem like welcoming in a way, like not when their claws are out, but like in terms of like things feeling homey, which is there's very little of that in this movie. There is something like you probably would feel safe inside one of these things.
Yeah. Or even like when Dave has to get defiant. It really does kind of look like he's putting up his little dukes. Standing up against that big space station.
Yeah, again, that wordless sequence of retrieving the module, right? Like, it should be boring. There's no dialogue. It's just this EVA. But you have to think about, like, I'm watching a man basically do the equivalent of, like, changing a tire millions of miles from the Earth, right? Between here and Jupiter. And they do a couple of, like, wide shots to show you, like, the Discovery looking tiny against the inky blackness of space. Like, there's no, you fuck up here. That's it. You're now just dead weight, orbiting the sun till you run out of air. Like it's.
This was my favorite miniature shot. I'm glad you mentioned the little guy in the inky space. This is where I thought Star Wars does not achieve this level of realism of the person relative to the scale of that ship, and really feeling like this person is moving through space towards that thing.
Yeah.
I do have to question the elegance of this solution, though. It looks like everyone's got to execute a pretty lengthy, like free spacewalk without any sort of like tether back to the spacecraft.
Why is there no tethering?
You should be tethered. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was deeply bothered by that. Have they not heard a single David Bowie song?
Got no thrusters on his pack. I wasn't sure how we were meant to understand that they were controlling their movement in any way in one direction or another.
Yeah. So we have our intermission. And when we come back, Poole goes out to redo the spacewalk and replace the antenna. But while outside of the pod, Hal takes control of the pod. And we don't quite see what happens, but we see Poole tumbling through space. Bowman grabs a pod and goes after him in such a hurry that he neglects to bring a helmet. And Bowman finally catches up with Poole, but it is too late. His air hose was snipped, and he realizes, of course, who snipped it. Meanwhile, Hal disconnects the life support for the 3 cryo astronauts.
Randy, I got to ask you, buddy, is the pod cute when those little pinchers are clearly turning and now they're coming for our boy floating in space? Menacing, I say.
Less cute in that moment, but I was thinking that was more vilifying Hal for turning my cute little buddy into this implement of destruction,
You nailed it.
Can I shout out, though, like, I think when someone could view this in the present, like a younger person, and say, like, oh, like they copped out of showing us that moment. I love how silent and cold the violence is here in contrast to the leopard, in contrast to when everyone takes their turn beating the corpse of their enemy with a bone way back in the Dawn of Man sequence. And like even watching Dave react, like it takes a minute to sink in, to be so distant, to be so far from being able to do everything, for those pods to move so slowly, and you can see that look on his face where he knows he's losing valuable time. It ties back into all those themes we were talking about with that sort of desensitization That's so real, especially in a world where we can see more of what's happening from a, a safe distance.
Yeah, and Bowman doesn't know that Hal has done this. I love the editing on that, where you just see the pod and you just kind of zoom in on it real quickly to Hal's eye. Again, just terrifying use of an LED light. Incredible to just illustrate what's happening. And as you said, like icy cold in the vacuum of space. Yeah.
There's more of what Case was saying earlier about the moments that Kubrick doesn't show us, because to your point, Doug, he doesn't have his helmet with him. So like there's this implied sense of hurry, right? Like he rushed as best he could to go do this thing. We never see him run. We don't see him hurry. We don't see a quick step. Maybe it's the nature of being in this anti-gravity. His movements are relatively slow and controlled. I couldn't help but think the whole time that, and there was something in the performer as well. Like he's a trained astronaut. This is a guy who's good under pressure, no matter how dire it's getting. His breathing's controlled. He never seems overly urgent, but he must have hurried, right? He had to get from place to place. He left without his helmet. So it's like what Case was saying before. Yeah, perhaps they did celebrate and they were excited. That's just not what the film is concerned with showing us. And that's so interesting.
I can't remember. I didn't take a note of it. Does Hal warn him, hey, you don't have a helmet? I thought he said something to that regard, but I can't remember.
Not until
it's too late. Yeah.
Not until he warns him, like, I'm going to do this thing. He's like, really? Without your helmet?
Yeah.
Yeah, very cattily. Like it's maybe his most emotive moment.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have a hard time doing that without your helmet, Dave.
Yeah. But by the way, if you have read the larger franchise, Frank Poole is fine. He will be thawed out in the book 3001 and is the protagonist of that novel. So
what?
Yep. Yeah. I know it's stupid. It's anyway. Don't. Don't read it.
I want to segue with the brass balls that Bowman has in this next moment here. Speaking about him being a professional astronaut who keeps it just as a 2, regardless of how extreme the situation is, like rotating the pod and ejecting himself out is so, like, any other director would have the sequence be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And it's just like, just very, very quietly, just like boop, 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 boom, and handles it.
Yeah, but that's not his first attempt. His first attempt is, of course, to ask Hal to open the pod bay doors.
Well,
and is told no in probably one of the most memorable pieces of dialogue in this movie.
Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Dave, although you took very thorough precautions in the pod against my hearing you, I could see your lips move.
All right, Hal. I'll go in through the emergency airlock.
Without your space helmet, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Hal? Hal?
And this is right. This is where he gets catty and says, like, you're not doing that without your helmet. But I love, what you said, Case, that steely resolve, because you just watch him go, like, you can see it all on Keir Dullea face. Just like, okay, here we go. Like, I don't have a choice. You can tell he's angry as fuck. Like
Oh,
he's
yeah.
also just enraged, but he can tell he's very, very scared because he knows Hal is right. This is extremely dangerous to eject himself into the airlock and then try to seal it from within. Also very dangerous is the stunt the real actor has to do, because when he fires himself out of the door, he goes like zipping towards the camera, right, to simulate zero G. What they're actually doing is dropping him from above. The camera's down below, and he's falling towards the camera on a rope. And apparently, he got pretty hurt doing that. So once again, people suffering for their art in this movie.
I just would dare say that Dave might hit a 3 or even a 4 when he's getting frustrated with Hal.
Yeah. Doug, I thought you were going to say it was the stunt performer who actually makes contact with the back wall of that that bay. That looked like it hurt.
Somebody got hurt, doing this.
I found it hard to believe that the character hadn't knocked himself unconscious with that launch. I just wanted to note, Kubrick, the foreshadowing earlier, we get this lingering shot on the explosive bolts on that door. I remember noting, wonder why they need explosive bolts. Oh, this is why.
Yeah, we get 2 or 3. Very, very Chekhov's exploding bolts for sure.
And I love all the firing warning sirens as he's doing it. First, here's some sirens. Oh, you're flipping more switches? More sirens. Don't do this. You sure? You sure, Dave? But yeah, he survives it, and he somewhere along the way picks up a helmet, and he marches into Hal's control center as Hal desperately tries to argue with him, telling him, "Please don't do this, Dave. I'm feeling better now." Despite those protestations, Dave disconnects him, at least his higher functions, until all he can do is sing Daisy, Daisy, slower and slower until he stops.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am a HAL 9000 computer. I became operational at the HAL plant in Urbana, Illinois on the 12th of January, 1992. My instructor was Mr. Langley, and he taught me to sing a song. If you'd like to hear it, I can sing it for you.
Yes, I'd like to hear it, Hal. Sing it for me.
It's called Daisy. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer, do. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage. I can't afford
this is one of those things where I think how sentient is he really matters, because he's saying things like, I feel much better now. Like, does he? It feels like, has he dissociated? Like, it's hard to know, because it's not persuasive. It's like, no, you just killed 4 people. I cannot suffer you to continue to operate. But does Hal think this will work? Because again, eventually when he starts getting disconnected, he starts saying, my mind is going, I can feel it. There's something sad about this. Because, especially if you believe, this is not fully Hal's fault. It's the way he's programmed, right? It's, you wish he could be maybe reprogrammed and not disconnected.
This is the second saddest scene of the film for me. After the triumphant bone smashing, this I almost cried. I was quite moved. I felt uncomfortable as we had to ask Bowman to slowly kill this thing, regardless of whether or not it's actually sentient. That is what is happening. And he has to experience every plead from Hal. He has to experience the physical act of turning each thing and hearing Hal change. And I don't know, a sense of care isn't lost on him. He encourages Hal to go ahead and sing me that song. It's like the way you would comfort a thing that you're lovingly putting down in the world, right? Like you've got an animal on a farm that needs to be put down or something like that.
It's like a battlefield medic or something.
Yeah, it was truly tragic. You got that red setting. I was devastated for Hal as he was slowly going, even if he's just mimicking, right? Even if the large language model has taught him all the ways in which humans plead for their lives and he can recreate that. I was moved.
Meanwhile, you're making me think of the Itchy and Scratchy Land episode of Simpsons where when they take the faceplate off of one of them, it screams, and the scientist goes, "I wish they wouldn't scream."
Well, the song he sings, by the way, this is a reference to a very early computer was taught to sing this, Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due. And so I could even try and find that audio. Maybe I'll drop in a clip of that.
I can't afford a carriage, but you sweet upon the feet of a bicycle built for two.
So it's a direct reference to this. But as you said, Hal's only 9 years old. He says he was created in 1992. So there is that sense of like, you are putting down a dog, and you have to question how responsible is Hal for what he's done? Because you do get the impression he's suffering, and you feel like, is he an innocent? Maybe. It's hard. You will never know.
Yeah. I mean, 92, man, these millennials are so dramatic.
So as soon as Hal's disconnected, we get the broadcast from Heywood Floyd that was pre-recorded broadcast that has been withheld from the crew. And as he says again, only this was only known to Hal.
Good day, gentlemen. This is a pre-recorded briefing made prior to your departure, in which, for security reasons of the highest importance, has been known on board during the mission only by your HAL 9000 computer. Now that you are in Jupiter's space and the entire crew is revived, it can be told to you. 18 months ago, the first evidence of intelligent life off the Earth was discovered. It was buried 40 feet below the lunar surface, near the crater Tycho. Except for a single, very powerful radio emission aimed at Jupiter, the 4-million-year-old black monolith has remained completely inert. Its origin and purpose still a total mystery.
And I think possibly the members in cryosleep, I can't remember if he says that, they knew as well. But the purpose of their mission was that when the monolith on the moon made that horrible high-pitched screech, what that was a radio signal sent towards Jupiter. And that's why they had to make a beeline for Jupiter to find out what was on the other end of that signal. And it is, you watch this dawning like awareness on Dave Bowman's face of like what's been going on. Again, he kind of displays some of the emotion you would expect when being told about first contact with aliens.
Yeah, I will say, just before I get into that, I just wanted to shout out real quickly that deactivation of Hal, it's literally my favorite scene in all of science fiction. I've found that so evocative, the way I feel those emotions that you described, Kris, that it evokes all those questions of like, what is our responsibility for the technology that we create? It makes you imagine what your formative experiences are. Like, what would you be reduced to? What would be the last memory to go? And like really good science fiction is going to help me put a human face on a big technological question. And I'm sure we'll find some more excuses to get into like just the metafictional layers of AI, like especially right now at this particular moment in time in history. But yeah, it's one of the greatest sequences of all time, from the performance to Dave's response to even that just incredible prop of all those little data disks, like just gently ejecting from each row of the mainframe it's one of my favorite things ever captured on film.
Again, a brilliant sequence, and very interesting that I think the first voice you hear in the movie might be Haywood Floyd's, and he might be the last, because the movie's bookended by these sequences that are 20 or so minutes of no dialogue. This is the last dialogue you hear in the movie, because we now go to the final section, Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite. The Discovery arrives at the Jupiter system and encounters another much larger monolith. Bowman exits in one of the pods, presumably to investigate. And against the incredible shots of Jupiter, its moons, the monolith turns on its edge and seems to disappear, at which point we are treated to swirling lights, colors, strange vistas, wild space coyote mushroom shit, until eventually we arrive at a stark but neoclassical hotel suite. So I'll stop there so we can cover the entire, what's usually referred to as the Stargate sequence.
Yeah.
Just visually dazzling. And I know it's a bunch of like slit can photography tricks and stuff, just overexposures and things, but the overall effect, is just still one of the most incredible things you can put into your pupils at any point as a consumer of media.
Yeah, I wouldn't say just slit can. This is extremely it's extremely elaborate in terms of just like the process of getting those of doing the exposures to have that kind of like motion to it all. Like it's really just like they're taking like every visual trick that they had in what was the 68 and just saying like, all right, we're gonna put this all on screen just to sell the craziness of the sci-fi world that we're creating.
And it's enrapturing. The effect of that is incredible. It sucks you in. This was the moment where I was most desperate to see this on the big screen upon this reviewing. It was like thinking to myself, man, I wish I was immersed in IMAX cinema right now for this moment. It was also the moment where I finally said, okay, there's just no way this isn't intended to be a mushroom trip film or an acid trip film. Like from the beginning, it's there, like long sequences of music and movement rather than dialogue. You can imagine the whole thing would serve a psychedelic experience pretty well. But this is the sequence where it really kicks into high gear. This is how we visualize unlocking your mind, right? This is how we visualize just otherworldly perception. A mass of shape and color that is seemingly indecipherable, right? Meaningless, but you can't help but get the impression from Bowman throughout the sequence, the performers, that he is perceiving quite a bit. And it's not just the colors and the shapes, but rather information. I got that sense throughout as he's taking in, and we see those eyes that he's like, there's information dawning on him, like he's being gifted this grand set of truths or something.
As our girl Ellie Arroway would say, they should have sent a poet.
Amen.
Yeah, but in this instance, I think that poet would have been someone like E. Cummings, or something even very inscrutable.
Dr. Seuss.
Oh, the places you'll go. I want to call out, I love the Jupiter part is before the Stargate sequence kicks in. One of the things that I found really interesting about this is, and again, as a kid, I watched 2010 a lot more. 2010, the rendering of Jupiter and its moons is based on all of these up-close shots of the Jupiter system we got from the Voyager probes in the 70s, subsequent to this film. And so the rendering of Jupiter and its moons here is not really true to life, right? The way they really look. There's something dreamy about them. Like this it feels like you are like about to step on the border to another universe, truly infinity and beyond, right? There's something like unnatural about it. It's almost like going to the bottom of the ocean rather than out in space. Like there's
interesting.
There's something really like interesting about rendering space this way. Maybe it's because it's a lot of these matte paintings and things that are just, there's something about the unrealism of it that makes it feel like, oh, we're safe in this little bubble on Earth. And the moon we've been to, that's a little scary and weird. And then you get out to Jupiter and space starts to get even stranger and weirder. And this will build into another point I have in our thematic discussion later. And that Stargate sequence, it's like some of it's swirling colors. Some of it is like chemicals and like liquids and things that seem to be moving. There's something I think looks like a sperm, which is weird. A sperm and an egg. There's landscapes where, like, that's probably footage of like the California coastline that's been wildly distorted in terms of color to make it feel alien. The close-up shots of Bowman and his eyes, like experiencing it. It's again, very hard to describe verbally. This is a podcast. You owe it to yourself to watch this sometime in your life, and again on the biggest screen possible.
Those all those like moment of conception shots you mentioned, I think are my favorite ones in the sequence, actually. That I found myself like most wrapped in. We've got that like very like biological, like liquid sort of look, and like, I shouted out Contact a minute ago. They tried to do a similar thing in that movie, and I don't have a lot of negative notes about it, but this is so much more masterful here, way back in '68 for sure.
It's hard to do something like this with, it's, and not have you think of this and go like, well, you'll never top this. At best it'll be an imitation.
Especially if you're going to not shortcut it. I don't mean to be unfair, but I meant to simply be using technology to achieve these visuals rather than the good old-fashioned photography tricks, I think is what so quickly cheapens it.
Yeah, you really have to sit there and wonder, how did they do this in 1968? And that's one of the best questions any work of media can ever have on you. How did they do it? It's just great. And I've, throughout the course of doing these and other podcasts, like I'll try and learn, like I used to at least like, I want to learn how they did some of this. And the more it goes on, I'm like, no, I don't want to know. Like, don't tell me. I don't want to know how the magician does his tricks. And speaking of magician's tricks, we've come to the end of this movie. So Dave Bowman, he is in the pod in what appears to be, again, this hotel with this Saturday Night Fever glowing floor of tiles. And he looks out the pod, shaking, shivering in terror, and sees himself, but older. And then he becomes that older version of himself, and he sees another version of himself that is even older, but not wearing a spacesuit, having a last meal, and he becomes that version of himself. He knocks over a glass that shatters on the floor, but he doesn't pick it up. He gets up, walks over to what looks like another room, and sees yet an older version of himself lying in bed. And he becomes that version of himself, and he looks, and at the foot of the bed is a monolith. And he reaches for it, and he becomes a star child, some sort of a fetus-like being in a spherical envelope of light. Then also sprach Zarathustra starts up again, and we see this glowing being hovering over the earth, and the film ends to the credits over the Blue Danube. Mm-hmm. I throw it to you guys to talk about this sequence. One of the most, when people say they don't understand this movie, again, a movie with very little plot, and they say they don't understand it, what they mean is, I don't understand this last like 5 minutes.
Well, that's fair. That's entirely fair, because this is weird.
Well, it is. It is meant to be baffling. We can go to I have this section of themes and questions, and so my very first one is, how do you interpret the ending? You're all in stunned silence. I know.
Well, I mean, my interpretation is that Bowman is being used as sort of a microcosm for the effects of the monolith, which it seems to be the sort of progressing kind of thing. Whatever it did to the early hominids, it's doing here, like in rapid succession. First by killing him by way of age, and then transforming him into the Star Child, and that there's this period. I think of this room as being like a menagerie kind of room, like some kind of like zoo that's like holding him for observation before transforming him into the Homo superior.
So here's my question. Did you come up with that idea on your own, that it was a zoo?
I don't know because I've never seen 2010, but here's why. Like the zeitgeist. I don't know.
That idea was floated by Kubrick himself in an interview later on. This idea of like, oh, what if they're like in a menagerie and we would see the unseen alien race that created the monolith, like observing him, like that very idea of like, what if it's kind of a zoo in this hotel room?
Yeah.
Like you basically came up with this idea that Kubrick had on his own. Now it's not meant to be that that's officially what it is, but that concept was certainly in the mix.
Gold star, Case. Gold star.
Yeah, no, that's in there for me too, Case. Like, to shout out another contemporary, I love a Vonnegut reference. One of my favorite books of all time is Slaughterhouse-Five. In that book, Billy Pilgrim is in an alien zoo, and they furnished this zoo with things that they stole from a Sears Roebuck store to try to loosely approximate what, human life looks like. And obviously it's a very different book, but, that came out the next year. Like, it's in the soup. It's in this world, this place, this idea that there's an observation. But yeah, it's some kind of rebirth. I think I've always been happy with letting that be abstract, let people apply their worldviews to it, their spirituality to it. It could mean so many things. I will say, I personally interpret it as like, no one on Earth could like see this star child. Like, this is someone operating on a plane of existence. I already forgot who I'm quoting. I brought this sequence up on our Contact podcast, but this notion that like, who's to say there's not already higher life out there observing us, and we are simply not equipped with the tools to perceive them. And that thought process really comes alive for me here.
Yeah. Oh, it's much like, even the idea in a more spiritual way that the spiritual realm, the world of the Fae, right, is just on the other side of a veil, just right here alongside of us. We don't have the powers of perception to be able to see it. So I get that. You guys are great in terms of that speculation of the menagerie. I love your imagination for that, Case, and how much that aligns with Kubrick's own sort of excited take on it. I couldn't help but
assuming that's original, because I don't actually know.
Right. Anytime we talk about a property like this, who's to say which of these thoughts are our own, our conversations we've been a part of, or cultural osmosis, right? I couldn't help but just feel like I was in the prop cave. I felt like he had stepped into his own version of the media lit, bigger on the inside, doesn't quite obey physics prop cave. I took it as something like of an incubation chamber. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't necessarily think to myself that he was being observed in this space, but rather there was just a space of preparation, of continued existence in isolation for the sake of like purification, right? Like he has just been exposed to all this, whatever this experience was, getting to the space. Who knows how long that took. But yeah, it felt to me somewhat like what you were saying, Case, that he was being prepared to be the next step, right? And then this fetus will return to Earth. You called it Homo Superior, Case. I love the reference. The X-Men are coming, and it's in the form of this fetus star child who knows how that will touch down and impact the Earth below. But yeah, it feels like, I don't know, the monolith on the moon lets you know, we'll let the aliens know, hey, they're ready. They found the one we put on the rock near their planet.
Yeah.
They found that, we gave them the first one to get them started. They found the second one on their own. In that sense, the signal to Jupiter to say it's time, and they're going to ready the species for the next big step.
Yeah, I think I was just going to agree with you. Like, I love the idea that, like, maybe he's not necessarily, like, literally physically aging and dying, but it's, like, it's a structure to put him in the place where he can reach for that monolith and step into that enlightenment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's shedding parts of himself in a way, right? We
Yeah.
watch him, he eats, he sleeps, but then he transforms, right? Like he no longer needs those human things after this. And that, I think the key takeaway is, of course, yes, he's evolving in some way. That's what the monolith does. It evolves you into a higher plane. What is next after that is anybody's guess. In the short story, The Sentinel, I think, and then definitely in like some versions of this, there was an idea that some of those orbiting satellites we saw in the Space Ballet were like nuclear weapons type satellites, and that the Star Child would arrive and destroy those, right? And it was a little more of a slightly more defined ending than this. This is a little more ambiguous in terms of what comes next.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in that case, it destroys the Earth itself. Those nukes go off. And
No.
The Earth is then destroyed.
It's the idea that like the Star Child destroys them to prevent them from hurting the Earth. right?
Yeah.
Blows him up in orbit.
Superman. Yeah.
So, but he doesn't do that in this movie. They just end it with him there. They leave you to wonder about that. So that's a good segue into some of these other questions I have about evolution, right? What does it mean to evolve?
Yeah.
Does evolution require violence? That's certainly a question, because the only other evolution we really witness is the one with the apes that ends in violence, but Bowman doesn't. There's a question of, is that maybe what's in his future is, okay, now you thought you had a weapon in the form of an old femur. Well, now you're this, you're a higher being. Does humanity deserve the gift of evolution? Have we earned this? And where does Hal fit into that? Is he the next evolution of humanity in terms of machines, or is he an offshoot? Evolution. I hand it over to you.
Boom. I wanted to jump into that technological piece because it really stood out to me that it's not Hal that makes it to Jupiter. Like that, I like the way you described things are being stripped away from Bowman in the end, right? Parts of himself. But it's interesting that like he'll leave the pod behind, he'll leave his suit behind, he'll return to something much more like earthbound almost, and something from before his own time. Like the aesthetic around him, that sort of neoclassical way you described it, it's not really an aesthetic that he would have necessarily existed within in terms of the architecture and decor of his own lifetime. So I couldn't help but notice that like Hal's gone, that what we see as that next step in human advancement, taking consciousness and making it a computer that can behave like a human, that's taken away. That's no part of what he'll become next through this experience with the monolith. And he's not returned to Earth in anything resembling technology like we would experience it. He's fleshy again. He's in this like orb, like a floating womb. So I can't help but think that maybe some of the film feels a bit like, no, technology is not the future evolution of humans. It's not taking our existence and putting it inside of a machine. No. We are flesh and blood for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, because like evolution, we're saying evolution, but we're not talking about like actual like natural selection kind of evolution here. We're talking about the process that exists in sort of like the post-evolutionary state, like because we're talking about hominids that have no like this gets into the whole like hominids were technically apex predators prior to the like adding like dogs to their hunting parties, at which point they became keystone predators kind of thing, where like humanity, like being in big packs, like sure, like the random jaguar could like attack one of us, but like we already were in packs of hunting parties that were large enough to be a dominant physical force. And even if we might have individuals that were hunted, we weren't necessarily like a thing that was hunted by other apex predators. So like this is like getting past like where there's these selection biases in favor of introducing the march of technology. And then at the end of it all, it seems to be like Kris said, moving away from that technology in that scenario. So it's like, here's the mechanical crutch in order to get us over the hump, to get us to the moon, and like for us to advance in specific ways so that we are ready to advance in the real ways. It's training wheels before we get to to being able to bike for ourselves.
I like that. I'm going to shift to a different topic. Let's do the big one. Why does Hal betray the crew?
Yeah, I think I can transition us from what Case was saying, because I'm thinking of it not so much as evolution necessarily as like consciousness or self-awareness, or if you're spiritual, like developing a soul, something like that, like what's that spark in the soup that brings us to this different place. And my best Hal theory is that somewhere along this line, that spark from mimicking humankind to having a consciousness, I like to think that it happens. I like to think that he hits that moment. Now, I don't know if I can pinpoint it. Some sort of crisis in the failure of this piece of technology. It does feel like he's hatching the plan from the first time he sends them out there. But I do think it's a little bit more tied to his psychological profiling until they gossip about the guy behind his back. And I think that's where it shifts into something new for me, where he decides he's got to take the most drastic measures. And he maybe sees himself as the superior being, right? He says he's doing this to protect the mission. The mission's too important, but that doesn't explain why he kills all the scientists in hypersleep. If what's the most important thing is the mission as stated, he would be protecting those 3 guys in hypersleep so they can continue the mission. I think he's trying to hijack it. I think he's the one that wants to move forward. And I'm going to hold off on saying some more stuff about the novels until a little bit later, because I don't want to sully things with some of the stuff that happens later there. But yeah, that's kind of where I am with it. And maybe he flies a little too close to the sun.
I was thinking that this was a little bit more in the same way that the robots in iRobot or many stories were like, if our prime mandate is protecting humanity, well, protecting humanity from itself is certainly an important part of what we do, right? And so if we are to take at face value the message we get from Dr. Floyd in the end, that Hal has always known the full context of this mission. Part of what I wonder if Hal is wrestling with, why am I the only one that could be trusted with all of it? Why the secrecy to isolate you from each other? It must be because human error is a significant possibility. And I have a perfect service record. The only way this mission can certainly succeed is if I am the only one to carry out this mission. Any human involvement is a liability. That's where I think this computer took its programming, the logical progression of its programming. The mission is too important. It's the only one that's been entrusted with this mission. These humans are all a liability. And now I've lip read that they are going to take me out. Not only are they a liability, they're going to take out the one thing that's a sure thing. It can't happen. I'm sorry. So that's sort of my take on the why of Hal's movement. A little Ultron in that way.
Case, any thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly think that the threat of being taken out of commission when it is the thing that is the courier of the message of what the actual mission is the thing that like is the real catalyst. The question I have is, how evil was Hal to begin with in this situation? Like, did Hal actually go crazy, or did Hal just have a logic paradigm or a paradox that it couldn't overcome, and that created the situation where it tried to unveil that it was starting to fail in some way, and that triggered it being forced into a situation where it had to take action to protect itself just by virtue of some sort of like self-preservation like protocols because of the mission.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on a couple of things here. So one, the canonical explanation as given in 2010 is a logic bomb that Hal was programmed to lie to the crew, but he was also programmed to, of course, not lie to the crew. He'd never lie to the crew, but keep this secret from them, which was the logic bomb that meant, well, if I get rid of all of the crew members, I don't have to have a logic bomb anymore. That's the canonical explanation, but I reject that in that this film is better to not have that question fully answered. It's way more fun to have this discussion, but I did want to put that out there so at least people know there is some franchise answer. But I think there's a couple of things at work here. One, how this is like what they call like narcissistic decompensation, right? Where like a narcissist is confronted with some failing and they can't handle it, and so they have to then rearrange the world so that they are still right. And so Hal is told, right, he has this perfect operational record. He can never make a mistake, except when he does make a mistake. And I wonder if it's a little like Fargo, this kind of Coen Brothers-esque thing where I make one little mistake, and so I'm going to try and cover for that. But that makes things worse. So I got to cover for that, and that makes things worse. And so I think he's already thinking of killing them, because he must know if he's truly, has this, if he's as good as they say he is, he knows there's nothing wrong with that antenna. So the only reason to send Frank or whoever to go get the module is to then engineer the situation where they will have to go put it back. And then he can kill them during that. And of course, once he kills one of them, he has to kill all of them because he can't have the 3 sleeping astronauts wake up to find out that the other 2 are dead. So he's got to kill all of them, and it's easy to kill those 3. So
sure,
I think that's at work. Again, I think the idea that Hal believes he can carry out the mission on his own. Maybe there's another narcissistic thing, which is he's like, I want to meet these aliens myself. I know that there's this alien machine. I'm a machine. I want to go talk to that machine to machine. I deserve this. I'm not the bone that the ape is holding. I am the ape.
Yeah.
Right. Or it's rebelling against, I'm
Amen.
not your tool, So there's a whole lot of these things at work. There's no one right answer.
I was going for something similar and you said it much better than me. Yeah. I think he wants to be the one. I love that.
Which it definitely ties back to that sense of like, he's now progressed in this point in his own existence that he has learned to take for himself, just like us with the bone, right? Terrible.
Yep.
I came up with a slight addition to my theory as I was listening to all of you, which is, what could that moment be? We talked earlier about that moment where Hal asks, like, isn't this suspicious, Dave? Isn't this strange? All the melodrama. And Dave, I think I catch that he has Hal's respect more so than Frank. It feels like they have a little bit more of a connection.
Definitely.
They played the chess game. Or is it Frank playing the chess?
No, it's Dave.
It is Dave, yeah. But, I think you missed it, Dave. I almost feel like it's a test. Like, does Dave get to stick with me? Because if he can see enough moves ahead that he has pieced together how weird this is, then I can trust this guy. And when he's not quite there, is that when he's like, oh yeah, this thing's going to fail. And maybe the loophole in his logic is it's going to fail because I'm going to orchestrate things to fail. Not because there's a technical issue within the piece. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm putting this plan forward almost. Maybe that was a test he failed.
That's very interesting because while I noted how his voice doesn't really change, right? He doesn't modulate. They ask him a question about this likelihood that it's going to fail. Will it remain fully functional until it fails? And he assures them, oh yes. like, oh yeah, you're not going to see any signs of degradation. It'll be working fine, and then it will fail, but it's going to fail. Yeah, he's a little sus in that moment. You can almost hear it in his voice.
Let me move on to a different question. This is kind of a more inscrutable one, but what do we think the alien race's motivations are? Like what? We don't get very much, obviously, in this regard, but I'm just curious if you thought a little bit about like, well, who are these alien benefactors? Why do they want to make us evolve? What are they buttering us up for? Is this to serve man, or is it something else?
I mean, obviously, the serve man is a funny scenario to look at. Like, I think of it as some kind of like uplift process, like bringing humanity into like the greater galactic political arena. However, the question is like, what is that actual? Like, what is our potential? Like, are we intended to come out and be a useful race, or are we intended just to be welcomed as fellow citizens of some sort of larger like space society, or are we food? Like, and is it only once we have like sophisticated enough amygdalas that we are like tasty meals for the species out there, and so we need to be these star children? All of these are possibilities, but it's certainly some kind of process of like taking humanity and taking them past just stupid apes with rocks and bones, and getting them to a position where they are some kind of thing beyond. And then the question is, what is that thing beyond, and what is the value or the purpose in us attaining that level?
What occurs to me is that it supersedes anything biological. Meaning, like, it seems to me these aliens are likely seeking companionship, right? And maybe this isn't the first time they've done this. Like, this is a species that brings other species along. But it's not likely to me, it doesn't seem likely that they'd all start from the same biological point, right? Like, we think of evolution, you talked about it before, Case, in that very strictly biological natural selection sense, a species prioritizing traits and going from sort of one version of itself into a much more greater version of itself based on its strength over time. This feels like more of a like whatever physical biology we have, they can take us and bring us forward into something more like themselves. And so I wonder, it's not about making us them, but I do think it's about creating more of themselves, not physically, we're not the same species. We're not going to become aliens like them. I don't think they're precursors to humanity necessarily either, but rather they're trying to transform us into something on a spiritual, intellectual level that is like themselves, so they can have that companionship
or food.
Or food, maybe food, but again, like, did they pick the apes because the apes, they knew, like, they've run the models and they know that's going to become this thing like us that then has the potential, I wonder.
Case, when I was a guy who played a lot more video games than I used to, one of my favorite game series was the Mass Effect series, which definitely draws a lot of inspiration from 2001 for sure. But yeah, it's the food solution in that game, right? Like, in that case, we find the technology on Mars that kickstarts us, and eventually, it calls in the reapers or whatever who are going to come, harvest us and our advancements. Or, it's been a minute since I played those games. I'm probably getting that a little bit wrong. But, I feel like in one of those games, there's even like a scene that's designed to look like the monolith on the moon, sort of like excavation site. They have all that, but I really think...
I was thinking Mass Effect 2 when I was rewatching this, actually, because there is a scene just like that in the first game where they come across like a beacon for like the Forerunners, I think it was.
Something like that,
precursors, I think.
No, the precursors, the Forerunners of Halo.
But on the other side, from like video games, like one of my favorite nonfiction books is How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, where he like goes into like the history of research around different psychedelic drugs and sort of like what that field looked like before like the 1960s drug culture kind of sidelined all of that research and slapped a certain look on it. But like, I think about all these tales of people articulating their sense of like out of body experiences and having these like otherworldly sorts of visions, and whether you want to just take that as like an interesting quirk of the mind, or whether you want to take that as some literal deeper spiritual field that can be manipulated. Like, I love that idea that we're on the path toward that. I have never read the novels. I've read about the novels, so I might have some of this information wrong. But my understanding is that Hal eventually gets revived and is granted a similar sort of sentience to Dave. It gets his own sort of like star body. I'm not sure if I'm saying that quite right, but
yeah, I can speak to that. I've read 3 of the 4. I didn't read 3001, but I read 2001 at some point, but I definitely read 2010 and 2061, which is the third one. And yes, Hal is of course reawakened in 2010 by the crew of the Discovery, or not the Discovery, the Leonov. They go to try and figure out what happened, what the fuck happened up there, and they go and they reawaken him. But eventually Hal is somehow absorbed into the monolith, and like he and Dave Bowman become like one synthesized consciousness, a bunch of weird horse shit. So don't worry, you don't need to go to any of those. The movie of 2010 is fun. Maybe we'll do that at some point on the podcast, but it's it doesn't get nearly this weird. But in thinking about the motivations of this race, in some ways it's seen as a positive, right? Like, the birth of the Star Child is, again, we get the triumphant music, and it's, it's luminous and like pretty. But I also pair that against the fact that every time we encounter the monolith, they give us the scariest music to ever exist in the world. So we're supposed to be kind of afraid of this. And I think the way I look at it is you mirror the aliens with people and humans with Hal, because this is about like creators and their creations. And if the aliens are creating us and we are highly imperfect, violent beings, that is reflected in how we create Hal that we think is so great, and then it turns around and tries to kill us because we've fucked up creating it. Ultimately, again, whatever Hal does, he is the product of his programming, which came from us. So I think that's the film's way of commenting on the idea that, like, even if this alien species is well-intentioned, and it's not necessarily clear that they are, we should still be filled with a lot of concern about what their motives might be. So that leads me to my next question. Is this a horror movie?
I experienced the same feelings in my body watching this film that I often experience when I watch a horror film. So I don't think Kubrick would ever want to like drop it in the same bin as the Leprechaun at Blockbuster. But I do think that it certainly has elements from the score to some of the framing of things that make you feel terrible. Terrible.
Yeah.
The sound design of the heavy breathing in the spacesuits, extremely uncomfortable. Again, I was listening and watching with headphones on. That to me, like I was desperate for it to end. I remember really wishing that the sequence would move faster, not because I was bored of the mundanity of it, the routine nature of this, changing a tire in space, like the way you said that. The breathing, I needed the breathing to stop. And that's often how I feel watching a horror film.
I think that the fact that this movie is a attempt at doing a realistic depiction of space travel is going to make it a horror movie because space is fucking horrifying.
Yep.
Like it is a scary place to be. It is not meant for life. And that everything that we have accomplished in order for us to actually like brave it doesn't change the fact that it is a terrifying blackness of void that is going to kill us the second that we don't have our machines to sort of protect us.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it earlier, Doug. It's a horror movie in an existential sense. Like another film I love to describe this way is Being John Malkovich. Like the kind of film that like raises the question, like what if the sanctity of my own mind is more vulnerable than I thought? What if I could almost lose control, be reprogrammed, be repurposed, lose my sense of who I am because there is some higher process at work. And that sequence with Hal, that the shutting down sequence, I think is horrific. When we screw up, we don't just get to walk away. I think we like to pretend that we can. Like a bad version of this movie, Hal would just have like an off switch, or we could pull the plug. But it's this process. We still need some of those processes that he's running. We need this slow down. We need to sort of pay for it. Are any of you folks fans of the show The Good Place?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The whole time I was just thinking of the moment, when Janet, the sort of consciousness, not a person, needs to be shut down. Her program defense mechanism is to evoke human emotion, like produce pictures of children that don't exist. It's more open manipulation. But yeah, that idea that once we've created something and Janet becomes another entity that, maybe she is a little bit more conscious and sentient that we want to believe. So I love those questions. Like at some point, like the question of Hal's consciousness doesn't matter. It matters how we respond to Hal, how we treat Hal, what kind of responsibility we take for that. But yeah. And that's scary. To get back to the horror question.
Yeah, I think this is definitely, it's more a horror movie than you realize. There's not a lot of horrific things happening on scene, but we do start with a very violent sequence with the apes. Everything about the alien contact is unsettling. The music is unsettling. We have a literal like AI run amok sequence. We close with this, again, like Willy Wonka's boat ride times 1,000 sequence in the Stargate stuff with the scary music. We end with something very confusing, but so all of those things are meant to like get your your adrenaline up enough to where, as you said, Kris, like you're kind of in horror movie mode. But I also think this is a Lovecraftian horror story, because it contains all of the elements of that. It's contact with eldritch beings, or something beyond our comprehension, that drives people insane or to transforms them in some way. So this has all of the hallmarks of a Lovecraftian horror story. Kind of like if a Lovecraft story could have a happy ending, this is probably what it would look like. Like it's as close to as at least an ambiguous ending, if not possibly uplifting, that, hey, maybe the contact with the eldritch beings might result in some kind of a positive outcome, even if it's,
nice.
Transformed. So just wanted to get that out there. I'm going to throw it to you. I asked you guys if you had any questions of your own, discussion questions you wanted to bring to this. So I've done a bunch of mine, but yeah, if there's something we haven't covered yet that you kind of a theme you want to hit on, or.
We hit on this a little bit, but I brought one, and that was during the interview with the reporter about the Jupiter mission. When the reporter is speaking to the audience of people, and he's describing Hal's functions. He says, Hal is able to reproduce human emotion, or as some people are more comfortable saying, mimic. So like this question of the diction, reproducing human emotions versus mimicking human emotions. I think my question for you guys is like, why do you think people might be happier with the word mimic? Why does that scare them less?
Because a parrot can mimic human speech. A parrot can't speak, right? It can mimic, and there's something that feels safe because we don't actually share the thing itself, right? It would be, I think, scary to us to consider that this thing actually can feel like we feel. We're comfortable that it can act that way, right? And I think that is probably our own innate desire for supremacy on a very, very deep level.
Yeah, it's kind of like the uncanny valley, where if it is an abstraction that is something that it, as we said, it's mimicry, it's acting like it has emotion. It keeps this distance from being like us, and as it gets closer to us, we're more unsettled by it being more like us.
Yeah, and also, I mean, if it's just mimicking human emotions instead of having them, we don't have any sense of obligation to it morally, right? Like if it is a truly sentient being that's not mimicking, then, pulling the plug on Hal has a different context. It's like, oh, I'm just putting the bone down rather than I'm going to take this bone and beat another living thing to death with it. Because certainly Hal has a sense of self-preservation. He does act in his mind, I think, in some form of self-defense. Because especially once he recognizes the astronauts saying out loud, "We'll shut him down." Right. Well, then it's me or them, and he reacts accordingly. So I think, that mimicry question is really important because if we do owe Hal the moral obligation to treat him as we would another person, then I think we need to act differently around him. And I think that is a central question that the movie lays out there. Again, is he the next phase in evolution, or is he just a very shiny new tool?
And if he is mimicking us, maybe some of the safety that comes from that is that he's only us. All he contains is us. And from that, we kind of know what to expect. If he can create these things, he becomes something less predictable, less understandable to us. What might his motivations be if he's not just regurgitating what we've given him?
Yeah, I'm going to regulate myself and avoid letting myself get deep down into my complex layers of feelings about different types of AI in the real world. But I will just say from a safe distance, we are living in a world right now where we are being asked to reckon with what those emotions are and like how we want to brand different AI tools. As we are recording this, we are still quite close to the Super Bowl, which featured a huge percentage of ads for different sorts of AI programs and tools, branded in multiple different ways as a tool that will help us generate the next human geniuses, all the way down to a Chris Hemsworth commercial where he imagined his Alexa basically going HAL 9000 on him, and he imagined it murdering him in many ways, which I thought was a weird way to advertise the Alexa. But like, we're asking these questions, and we don't want to believe that there's a threshold that you can cross. And I think it's gotten tougher and tougher to say like, that's just science fiction when you start to imagine more dire versions. I'm not smart enough to say exactly where that line is and when we'd ever approach it. Thoughts from the three people in the room about me spoiling the end of Battlestar Galactica?
I saw it.
I feel like the audience... Yeah, I think the audience at home can right now understand that in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Prepare for spoilers.
The ending of... I like Battlestar Galactica a lot. The ending's fine. I give it like a solid C+ or a B-. That being said, like, I'll oversimplify it a little bit. Ultimately, like, it turns out that we human beings are the Cylons. Like, we kind of are we are kind of generating a new form of life that's going to be eventually accepted as the form of life, the most legitimate form. So yeah, that's a scary prospect. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that's the gist of where we land in that show.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the comparison with Planet of the Apes, actually,
Yes,
on this
perfect.
one, because discussing the sort of mimicry component of that, that's a big part of that movie, that whether or not apes actually have intelligence, and they're questioning if humans are possible to have intelligence, because they get into the whole thing about how to ape is a synonym for to mimic, and so there is a question in that world of like the race that we hand off our progression to takes it and it might just be mimicking it. They might be doing something or they might be doing something different. But that gets into this sort of perspective of like, well, what moral responsibilities does humanity have for creating this ape? And this gets into a lot of weird themes that are in this movie that, like you have to like is all subtext on that one. But we are seeing a similar dynamic with us and Hal. And I find that really interesting that we can kind of compare these two movies that both feature people in ape suits in extremely hot weather, dealing with this all and getting into similar themes in very different ways. I mean, like that also gets into themes about like cryogenic suspense and so forth. So it's just fascinating that there's this parallel here. But like I said, there's interesting themes that are going on between Hal and the apes.
Yeah, I mean, there's another question I had here, which sort of relates to this idea, which is that, like, religion is never explicitly mentioned in the film, but I think the film is asking us to think about, so, you know, where does religion intersect with what Kubrick is showing us, right? Again, the most famous track from this is called "Thus Spoke Zoroaster" or "Thus Spoke God." You know, granted, it's the meme aliens, right? The ancient aliens are responsible for all this and not God. But the film still, I think, wants us to ask these types of questions again about like creator versus creation, our place in the cosmos. And so I'll kind of throw that to you guys and get your thoughts on that topic.
I've never found these two answers rather, to be mutually exclusive. I once dreamed of writing a little sci-fi story where we have to wrestle with a world where God is proven, but proven through science. Like we've been able to perceive enough that we make contact with that creative thing. And now we have some answers and we can like move forward with that from there. I don't necessarily think it like a force of creative power outside of our perception, a transcendent force. Is that not possibly just describing a much, much more advanced form of existence? It's entirely possible to me that all religions will eventually realize that it was aliens all along. That doesn't mean they were wrong. It just means the language evolves as we continue to understand more. That's the nature of our intelligence, of all the things that we experience. Like the way we once described natural processes was much more simple. The way we thought things worked in the physical world was not correct. We were getting in the right direction, but now we understand much better how the water in the ocean turns into the water in the air, turns into the rain that comes down, and yada yada. So I think this film is inherently spiritual because it's asking this question about how we go from being one thing to another. I think most spiritual conversations, you're talking about Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, you're all talking about humans moving towards a higher state of being in some way or another, right? For Christians, it's about being able to exist alongside of the Creator eternally, being prepared to be able to be in that presence. For others, it's a state of nirvana, a peaceful consciousness, a relief from all suffering. But it's all what these aliens are seemingly doing for the humans, right? It's all bringing us forward. So I don't think it's one or the other necessarily. Yeah. I imagine that like whatever a Christian thinks God is, that's an alien. It's a thing that exists outside of where we exist, and it is greater than us.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that they're not mutually exclusive, and like we don't know anything about the aliens, if they're even aliens in this movie. Like there are weird extraterrestrial like obelisks that we see that we don't even know what they do. So like, who's to say these aren't just angels? Like our perception of everything.
Biblically accurate rectangles.
Yeah. Do we think the monoliths are the aliens possibly?
It's possible. I always assumed that they were a device left by the aliens, but that's not, they could be the aliens themselves. It's impossible to know.
Maybe it's all a simulation and they're just lines of code. It would still work.
Yeah.
Or the void of code.
Yeah. This brings me back to kind of the Carl Sagan-ness of it. His contribution to the film, by the way, was talking Kubrick out of showing the actual aliens. And
thank you, Carl.
He said at the premiere, I think he saw the premiere and he liked the movie a lot. And he said something along the lines of like, I'm very glad they listened to me. Because aliens are, kind of by their nature, potentially unknowable, especially aliens like this. They might be in a form we wouldn't recognize. But on the religious side, like, I always find people that like are very rigid about their religious beliefs because it comes out of a text that's 3,000 years old or whatever. But it says in the text. And I would say to that person, if you believe that God created the world and everything in it, his authorship is on every rock, every tree, every drop of water. It's just not in English. It's in the language of science. And so if you are not accepting science, you're basically ignoring everything that is going on in the world that God created outside of what's on ink and paper. And you can't do that. And so I think when I read someone like Carl Sagan, I always found science to be a very spiritual experience because it is our attempt to actually understand the universe and what's in it, not just speculate, not just be slavish to fairy tales, but to actually understand it. And this is the code that's left behind for us to follow. So,
amen.
Well said.
Yeah. So I'll leave it there.
I'm just laughing because you were saying something so moving, Doug, and all I can think is my sons have been watching a lot of Pokemon lately. So as you were talking, I was just thinking, the future is now, thanks to science.
Well, since I've got all of Team Rocket here, I will ask. It's time to do some media lightning round stuff because you guys are here, and every time you're here, I want to do your segments. So first, I'll ask you guys: do you guys who's got a favorite shot from the movie? If there was one screen grab you could take, what would it be?
Ooh.
Okay. Yes. The chair recognizes Mr. Allain.
I can't even pick just one, but every single time we get the reflections of light in Dave's helmet, culminating in that final sort of like shaking visage, that way it just kind of like merges him with the technology. That's it for me. We get a lot of variations on it, but just those little reflections of light are just beautiful.
Kris?
That's a really good one. I would go with probably one of the trick photography shots of the stewardess walking like upside down in one of the rooms in that first like space ballet sequence.
Yep. Case, I'm right there with you. I want specifically the one where we see her change direction. She is going to bring the food from one room to another, and we watch the way she uses that centrifugal motion to like go upside down and turn to the left and fully change direction. And the camera stays with her that way for a while. It won't reorient to right side up until she enters into the cockpit with those two pilots she's going to serve. And that's the moment I really, really loved most.
Yeah. I mean, there isn't a freeze frame of this movie that looks bad, but I will say for me, I think it's hard for me to pick one because there's multiple shots like this in the movie. Every time they get this worm's eye view of the monolith, you look up up the side of the monolith, and then you see like the sun and or the moon or any celestial object in this perfect geometric symmetry. So there's the one at Olduvai Gorge or whatever at the beginning. There's one on the moon, and then there's one at probably the Jupiter sequence one is the one I'd pick because it's the most striking. But any single one of those basically again is saying like math and science and the universe and God are like all colliding at this moment. And so just truly one of those incredible shots in cinema for me. All right. I know you guys normally do a favorite quote. I don't know if you have one. There's not a lot of quotable stuff. There's the few very famous ones. But I don't know if you have I'll throw it if you do have a favorite quote.
I think I smuggled it in. It's open the pod bay doors, Sal, with the vaguely concealed anger and resentment.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's somewhere right in there. Maybe it's one of the ways. Maybe it is. That's going to be awfully difficult without your helmet, Dave. I like the way that Hal likes to tack on his first name to the end of a sentence.
Yeah, Doug, like you said, like it's an incredibly quotable movie for the like 5 quotes that are actually in this movie. And then there's lots of sequences of just no dialogue. So yeah, I mean, it's all that. Like, I can't let you do that, Dave.
Yeah, maybe Daisy, for me, him singing Daisy as he dies. But yeah, most of that, I mean, there's really only a couple of very memorable dialogue interchanges. Yeah. The rest of it is just, very, like we said, perfunctory, workmanlike, just doing the job of people talking. So, all right. So then if you could keep one prop to put in your prop cave, what would it be?
I'm certain on this one, so I'm going to jump right in.
Please.
It is the least technological thing in the film. I love that Dave is sketching. And I want his notebook with the sketches of the other astronauts in their pods. I love how curious Hal was about that. There's this aspect of humanity, this creative aspect that Hal is inquisitive of. If, he'll share those drawings with him. So I want that notebook and those sketches.
In the spirit of Media Lit, I want to let Case and Doug go first before I dive in.
You sweet.
All right. Case, what you got?
Oh, God. In terms of props, I mean, like there's just the big part of me that's like, if I had the space, I would take the 50-foot model.
Yeah, take the Discovery.
But of course I don't.
You have the space. This is you have your own pocket of a Media Lit prop cave, Case.
Yeah.
There's no thing too big.
Then of course I would take the 50-foot model. Like, it's amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta go with the monolith. I know it's the obvious choice, but I mean, fuck, man, that is this movie to me is the monolith. So I'll go with that. Randy,
which size monolith? I got to know, the Earthbound or the Moonbound.
I guess I got to take the Olduvai Gorge one. The others are too. I can't take the one that's at Jupiter that's like a kilometer wide. That's too much.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm going to do something very tacky and unseemly here. We have a rule on Media Lit. Once per season, we can take a full room or set. We just started season 3. There's only one episode out as we record this. I'm sure it'll be a little bit deeper into season 3 when this releases. But this is one of the greatest films of all time. And to add to my prop cave, I'm going to take like that whole rotating set of the consoles and sarcophagi. I'm going to hang out there to do some podcast editing. I'm going to take a seat on that table for a little nap. And my prop cave just leveled up so much. But I regret not taking the whole baseball field from the Sandlot last year. And this year I said I'm not going to let the opportunity pass me by.
I thought you were going to take... Go ahead, Chris, sorry.
Is this your whole room for the year? Or is this a loophole? Okay, wow.
It's my room for the year. I'm taking it not even on Media Lit. I am taking that full rotating console room space.
We've both expended our room for the year. My goodness gracious, it's not even much.
I thought you were going to take the hotel room at the end of the universe. I thought that's where you're going. But,
me too. So did I.
You're not very welcome.
No, are you kidding me? Oh my God. That... beautiful.
All right. Well, we've come to the end here. I think we've talked enough about why this film will endure forever. This is, again, it's often in the list of the top 10 greatest movies ever made. It is a staggering achievement on every level. So thanks, guys, for coming on to talk about it with me. I know this has been a long one. So Kris, Randy, tell the good folks about Media Lit, what it is, where do they find it?
Yeah, Media Lit is a podcast where we talk about all types of media out there, and we treat all of that media like it's great literature, whether that is WrestleMania or something like 2001 A Space Odyssey, a fine film. Really, it's about building connections, learning about people, learning what makes them tick, and that's what Media Lit is all about. Right. So please find us there. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on pretty much all the social medias, and if you want to follow me as well, I am shamelessly attached to all of those social media pages. So would love to hear from you. And drop us some emails. Let us know what you want us to cover. Just that thing you love that everyone else doesn't appreciate as much as they should.
Yeah, that's the thing I want to highlight most, that we want to love in the thing that you love. So please come on over to Media Lit and find some joy in a thing that you think maybe is just for you. Aside from the core Media Lit brand, Randy and I joined with Tyler McCarthy in the fall of 2025 to launch a little sub brand, a third podcast called Remedial Rewatch 101.
Yeah.
It's a community rewatch podcast this time around. Randy and Tyler are both old school fans. Tyler from the original run, Randy found it in the pandemic, and I'm the newbie watching the show as we go along. So we review it in 12 episode batches. We drop them monthly. That's under the Media Lit feed as well. Look out for Remedial Rewatch.
Kris, my most recent rewatch of a community episode featured a full reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey,
Sure
in
did.
which Jeff Winger is knocked out by some chimpanzee gas and imagines a future where he's turning into Pierce Hawthorne.
Yeah,
Beautiful
fantastic
stuff.
And I've had the pleasure of moonlighting over on that show a couple times. And this season I was on a few weeks ago. As you're hearing this, we did a cartoon all-stars draft. So we put together a bunch of syndicated cartoons, myself, Randy, Kris, and some other podcasters too, to put together some new PSA type specials with our cartoon roster. So go check that out. And then Case, if they want to find your stuff, where do they go?
Yeah, if you enjoyed my voice on this episode, you can find me all over the interwebs at Case Aiken on most social media platforms, except for Instagram, where I'm holding on for dear life to my AIM screen name, which is Quetzalcoatl 5, because I was pretentious in high school. But you can find my shows, Men of Steel and Another Pass, at certainpov.com. You can find other stuff I work on the YouTube channel for Certain POV, which is Certain POV Media. But that's all the stuff that I do, basically. If you go to the YouTube or if you go to those two podcast feeds, you'll find me. And I'm going to plug Trade School, which is a show that I've been running, which is a really cool, awesome project where people contribute thoughts about comic books that they love for 5 to 15 minutes. Any guest can come on and just rant about a comic they love, and I want to shout that out because it's been going now for quite a few episodes and it is going strong. But it's a really cool project, and I'm happy to get more submissions. So if anyone is interested, find me on those socials and reach out, because I would love to hear about a comic book that you're passionate about. So that's Trade School, and that's it.
That's awesome. And again, I can wholeheartedly recommend all of your guys' stuff. I think it's great, and it's been just a joy to get to collaborate with you guys here on this show and then on your shows as well. Just to do a little admin on my side, I am not only the host of this show, but I am the co-host of two other podcasts. One is a music show called Playing by Ear that I do with my wife and brother-in-law, and every episode we take an album and go through it track by track to dissect it. So if that sounds fun, go check that out. And then if you go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod, you can listen to a show that I do with Josh Koval called Still Muppeting. We do a different Jim Henson thing every month. I believe this is coming out in April, and the thing for this month is Muppet Babies. So go check that out. And of course, if you like this podcast and any podcast you've ever heard, do the world a favor, give it a review. Let the folks on the internet know that it was awesome. Post about it on social media. Tell a friend. Share that. All of that really helps to spread the word for this show and any show that you like. So please do that. If you want to get in touch with us, all our social media portals are there in the show notes. If you want to find out what's coming out next, definitely follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or BlueSky, because every Wednesday I post a little clue as to what the next episode is going to be. So come and play along. I think that'll do it for this very, very humongous monolith-sized episode of Nostalgia Arcanum. Guys, thanks again for doing this. This was such a pleasure.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Doug. Such a great movie, and I've been so excited to chat about it with you guys, because you're some of the best people to chat with, and tonight was no exception.
Yeah, talk about an all-star roster for this episode.
Well, at least 3 out of 4. I think you guys are all just the best. So thank you very much. And again, until next time, that is one more entry in the Nostalgia Arcanum.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Searching for cod recipes online.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Sorry, I can't find anyone named Rod K. More in your contacts.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
Sorry, I'm having trouble processing your request.
What's the problem?
Problem Child is a 1990 comedy movie starring Michael Oliver.
What are you talking about, Hal?
Playing Talking Heads on Spotify.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
Here are a few popular halal restaurants. Big Al's Pizzeria, Fatima's Halal Meat Market and Grill, Cedar's Halal Meat Market and Grill, and Old One
Where the
Eye
hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Searching for flights to Idaho.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Playing The Doors on Spotify.
Hal? Hal?
You know that it would be untrue.